What's up, guys?
Oh, man, John. Well done, brother.
Good.
Well
Absolutely.
done. Well done. Oh, man.
The fruitcake boogie.
Nice.
Is that what you call it?
Nice.
Yeah.
Well done, dude. That's
nice.
It fits the theme of the show really well. I mean, it sounds like what we talk about. So that's well done.
Nice, John. Thank you. And thank you, Sandra, for that. That is fresh.
Sandra, you're awesome.
Yeah,
Oh,
Sandra,
God,
good
yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Off the presses. Yeah, that is, brand new right here. Yeah. How you guys
What's going on, you guys?
Hey, everybody.
Halenville Live.
Right
Yeah,
on.
Excited tonight. We've been waiting for a couple weeks for this show.
Yes. Very much so.
Yes, we have.
Very, very much so. Excited as we can be.
It's Christmas Eve here, man. That's how I feel.
All week.
Yeah, right?
All week. Man, oh, man.
Yeah. Got a very important book coming out October the 5th. Yes, and
pre-order it now, everybody.
Yeah.
Get them all the time.
Yep.
Very good.
Amazon.com.
Link is down in the description. We have the authors with us. Yes, we do. Very excited. John, who we got with us tonight, dude?
We have Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill. All the guitar guys out there and girls know these guys for the last 30 years. They've been our pipeline to all things Eddie Van Halen at Guitar World, among other things. And Brad and Chris have also written other books. Notably, Brad has done Conversations with Jimmy Page about 6 or 7 years ago. And he also did a book called Play It Loud with, I think, Alan DePerna. And, we owe him a debt of gratitude for that, too, because that was the impetus for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Play It Loud exhibit, where we all got to basically hold the Frankenstein guitar through a plexiglass box and take 50 million pictures of this guitar we've all geeked out over for the last, 40 years. And so buy the book because of that. Anybody who went to the Met and got to see Frankenstein, buy the book just simply because of that. Also, Chris wrote a book called, I think, Guitar Legends, Definitive Guide to the World's Greatest Guitar Players, which is a cool book for anybody who wants to see who is who out there. So everybody check those books out too. And like I said, for the last 30 years, these guys have been our pipeline to all things Eddie. So, they know they know that the material in this book is just phenomenal. It's from start to finish. It's one thing I'll say is, a lot of people ask me, oh, is it just the Guitar World interviews just in book form? And it's not that at all. It's far from that. It's just, when we get them on there, we'll discuss it a little bit more. But I don't want to keep them waiting anymore. So go ahead, Tony.
Let's get them in here, ladies and gentlemen. Here they are, Brad Tolinski and Chris Gill.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Hey,
well,
guys.
John, you played that boogie in the beginning that we heard at the top of the show.
Yeah, you had to do a boogie, right?
Had to do the boogie.
Nice job. Sounded really good.
That was special for you guys here tonight, right?
We're honored.
Yep. So let's get right into it if you guys don't mind. So, I'm just going to give you my impression overall at first of the book, my review of the book. So for people out there who were wondering, is this just a recap of the Guitar World interviews? It's nothing of that sort. This book to me was almost like a train ride through Eddie Van Halen's life from Holland to Pasadena and beyond. And at each stop on this train ride, Eddie pops in and explains to us what was going on in his life at those particular times, and that led him to become the person he ultimately became, and the world famous guitar player. There. I took some notes here. I wrote some notes down here, and the theme I feel throughout his life that you guys show in this book is, he's like an introverted immigrant genius with genius musical talent who suffered from like major social anxiety, which led him to drink and do drugs just to function around people. I think he, the stories of him that you guys, talk about in the book are at the end of his bed, playing his guitar for hours at a time. And then later in his life, locking himself in the 5150 all hours a day. It's basically, that was just a continuation of that. And I feel like, ultimately deep down, he was this famous guy who was like, world famous. But I think that, I got the impression from the book too, that he knew a lot of people, had a lot of acquaintances, but I don't think he had really many like close friends. I feel it was his brother, it was his son, it was Janie at the end, and it was Matt Bruck, and I think that was it, really. I mean, and I don't feel like he was never out and about and doing things like that. I think that was his core group right there. So for such a famous guy, it's kind of interesting. But that goes back to that whole introverted thing, and but I think that's the theme of his life, and a lot of his life is that immigrant kid, the scared immigrant kid that came over here with this social anxiety, even later on in his life, it seemed like going to parties and stuff like that. He just couldn't kind of function that way. It wasn't his thing, So, but that's and I feel like that you guys really in the book got that point across. And I think that you covered him very fairly, and there's nothing sensationalistic in this book. And I believe that listen, there was a Freddie Mercury movie a couple of years ago and all this. We may not get an authorized biography from his estate, because I don't think they're really interested in doing that. I just don't think that's their thing.
Yeah.
But I think that if any Hollywood people are going to option a book, this is the book that would be optioned for a film, because you guys really, for people who have maybe met him, shook his hand a few times or whatever like that, but never really spent time with him, this book gives you like a composite of who this guy was and what made him tick. By the time you finish this book, and the book is just an amazing story of, the whole immigrant story, the story arc to the dark period, and then to the redemption at the very end. You know what I mean? It's like, we all know he died too young, but I feel like there was redemption, because I know I was kind of angry at him at that early 2000 period, from 2000 to 2006. I remember going to the Meadowlands in 2007 when he stole the monitor around that night, and I had my arms folded the whole night, and I was just kind of like, I was still kind of angry, at him, because the last few years, with the porn movie soundtrack, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're Eddie Van Halen,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But then to see the last few years and him being back to that guy with that smile, that everybody, it's Eddie Van Halen, and it doesn't, soften the blow of his death, but it makes me feel better about, his whole life in the story. And you guys really nailed that in this book. So this is a benchmark book, and it's a must read for every Van Halen fan, and not even just Van Halen fans. There's tons of guitar stuff in there to make us happy. I don't know how your editors felt about all that guitar stuff in there, but we love it. But at the same time, it doesn't take away, and the way you guys put it together, it doesn't take away from anybody can read this book. My wife can read this book. Anybody. It's just a great, story. So anyway,
I think the purpose of the book was, the Van Halen fans tend to sort of focus on this event or maybe that event, or his fight with David Lee Roth, or maybe hopefully the greatness of his playing. And really what I wanted people to read this book and see is the whole of Eddie's story, and not just like this sensational bit or that sensational bit, but to understand, why he did what he did, and the things that made him great. So, I mean, it's a weird thing with genius, right? On one level, he was an introvert, but it was that sort of, as you so kindly mentioned, but it was that introversion that, made him practice his instrument and become so great for all of us to enjoy.
If I can piggyback on your comment, right? One of the things that struck me, and I find it very interesting too, that I viewed this book as a human interest story, just told in the vehicle of being about a band, but it was very much like a human interest story. What you just mentioned, I found interesting. And I think John and I had kind of discussed this privately alone. There are, and I don't know if you can actually speak to this or not, but I found it very interesting because there was far more from reading your book. I found it far more interesting. I wondered if there was any sort of level of autism or things like that to some of his behaviors. And for some reason, we've seen things like Rain Man, as a movie or something, these geniuses, especially prodigies, these idiot savants kind of things. And the one thing I thought, and for some reason it dawned on me, like in the last 5 years, 10 years, the NFL has started doing concussion, protocols on people. And some of the people that have committed suicide in the NFL have committed suicide by not hurting their head. They've shot themselves through the chest and then donated their brain to science. And I just found it fascinating because and not that I'm requesting this or hoping this happens by any means, but I always found it, if there was ever some way to study Eddie's brain posthumously, I think that would be fascinating, because there's so many things about it. There's, half the time, some of the stuff you wrote made me feel like he's not even of this world. He's not even from this planet.
Well, I don't know if it's autism, but certainly there's a certain degree of obsessive compulsiveness about his behavior.
He did like to withdraw.
Yeah, but again, I don't think it doesn't take away from his genius, and there might be be an element to all the people that are brilliant at what they do. Sure, there really might be. You have to have some natural talent, which he did, which he inherited, I think, from his family. But I think you have to be devoted, and I think part of what we tried to get across, at least early on in the book, is that when he came to the U.S., he couldn't speak English. He couldn't speak the language. And he was, harassed at school, and that made him withdraw. So we took these natural talents and laser focused them. And that was part of the reason why he became, the beloved figure he is. But it's not just, people think a lot about this, the frets and the picks. When you think about Van Halen, right? He didn't just think about the playing. He thought about the guitar.
Oh, right.
How he created. He thought about his amplification. He thought about this. He thought about that. He thought about it so much that, he ended up reinventing everything to suit specific sort of needs.
Yeah, one of my favorite passages of your, one of the things you guys touched on, which I thought was fascinating, is you almost, even in the later years too, when, it may have been a result of substance abuse and stuff, but I found it fascinating that he seemed more coherent and lucid and able to speak clearly when he had a guitar in his hand, as opposed to having a conversation without it. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, that was for sure.
It's he was, I think, singularly obsessed. There was just an obsession with guitar that goes beyond the average person. So many people are content to just pick a guitar up at the shelf, and plug in and do this and try and sound like the other guy. And I think part of it too is just that Ed, right off the bat, just realized that I sound like me, and I'm just going to nurture that. I think, we see so many people on the internet who are great. I love them. I'm one of these people myself. And, I have a column in Guitar World where I recreate these sounds of all these records and everything, and dig into the nuts and bolts of how it was done and everything. And I spent a good part. In fact, I still do. I'm, to use Ed's term, tone chasing, but it's just figuring out what's, how did they get that sound and whatever. And Ed just kind of like, I'm just doing this, and I'm going to find my own way. I'm going to find my own path. I'm not going to take someone else's path to get there. And I think that was just what drove him throughout his whole life. You know, he heard things a certain way. He heard things differently than most of us did. And it was just that goal, you know, again, that obsession, just that focus, you know, just that laser focus. I think that was it more than anything. I think that's kind of, you know, I think some of the anti-socialism did start from his childhood and everything like that. But then it became, I'm just focused on this and no one can understand what I'm doing here except for me, you know, and even his bandmates couldn't understand. Like when it came to Fair Warning, you know, like he was so focused on that record.
Even, you know, it's interesting. I thought one of the, you know, we interviewed Steve Vai for the book, and we didn't pick Steve just because he was, you know, great guitar player, which he is, but, you know, he plays a part in the Van Halen history, and that he, you know, took over for Ed with David Lee Roth Band. And during those tours, half of their set was Van Halen songs. Like Steve had to learn how to play.
Yes, they were.
Or get into that, you know, get into that thing. So I definitely wanted to talk to him, and he has such a brilliant mind himself, guitar mind. And I was asking him what he thought were some of the things that made Ed tick. And he made this great point, is that Ed was just chasing a sound that he heard in his head. He had to think of it first. What made him great was that he heard this thing in his head and had to figure out how to make it. It wasn't like a lot of guys, you know, a lot of us, we get an amp, we get a guitar, we stumble upon a sound. Oh, that's good. Ed had something very specific in mind. You know, that we all enjoy and love today, and stopped at nothing in order to get it.
Yeah, I think the perfect example of that in your book was when he talked about laying out 3 different guitars on the floor, all tuned differently, so he could strum the chords and get like that kind of stuff. And you guys mentioned this numerous times. Yeah, but you guys allude to it numerous times, but like the other people don't think that way. Like who does that? Maybe Prince. I think you guys might alluded to Prince. But it's just it's a completely different brain working.
Cutting the horn off so he could do the dirty movies.
Right, the slide part, right?
And we're just like, you know, it's the vintage guitar. It's not. We're making an album. What do we have to do? Get this out of the way. So let's do it right here. That's amazing.
That's a big reason why the Eddie's Oddities was such a key part of the book, and sometimes those things just didn't fit into the narrative, you know, the wider story. But there's these specific examples that I just thought, you know, that those are all basically most of them are from a 2013 interview I did with Ed for Guitar Aficionado, and he pulled out 50 guitars for me. We took photos of them, and he told the stories behind every one, and every guitar had an amazing story behind it. And I just remember going through that stuff for the book and going like, this is just too good to leave on the cutting room floor, because it shows this thought pattern. You know, just there's things that came out when he told those stories about those guitars that wouldn't come out in an interview otherwise. And I found that really fascinating.
Well, Steve also tells a story where Ed, Steve, and Frank Zappa were at Zappa's studio, and they're passing around this guitar, and there was some fret buzz going on, and Steve in his mind was thinking, well, you know, we should just get another guitar, and Ed just said, oh, hand me that screwdriver over there, and he took the screwdriver, just shoved it under the nut of the guitar. And he said, there, it's fixed. And so they ended up jamming with this guitar with the screwdriver sticking out of it for the rest of the time they were up there. And so Steve was saying that was the other interesting thing about Ed, was that if he saw a problem or saw something that he was looking to pursue musically, he didn't fuck around. Like, he just went after the solution and didn't really care how pretty it looked. You know, all he cared about was that, and, you know, getting that sound at the end of it.
there was little reverence for these instruments.
That's such a good story. That's so indicative. Yeah, so good.
So cool.
I was telling people, just like, vintage guitar enthusiasts, look away because there's a hall of horrors here. There's I didn't even realize this until many years after the fact. I was looking at the pictures of Ed's 50s Strats and realized that they were all missing the volume knob. Like he'd taken the pot out of all these vintage, Strats that are worth $20,000, $50,000, $70,000. And he'd taken the volume pots out of them, and it's just like, obviously it's like he put them in another guitar. And I know that he used, a Strat to record Cathedral, and it's like, he probably liked the action of those old 50s Strat pots. And it's just like, wow, he just took them out of there. He had a guitar that was a gift to him from B.B. King, and it was all in pieces. He had taken the tailpiece off and the bridge, and I think a pickup was missing. And it's signed like, to you, Eddie, love B.B. King. And it's just like,
it didn't matter.
It's like, this is a collectible. B.B. King gave you this guitar and he took it apart, and like the bridge is somewhere else and the pickup somewhere else. He just was not sentimental about his instruments at all. They were tools. And, God bless him because he made some awesome music, with those experiments, Well,
I'm even fascinated by how early in his life he kind of developed these habits. I mean, you guys reference one of my favorite stories in the book was him trying to buy a 12-string and say, well, can you take 6 strings off and give me a discount because I don't need the other 6? That kind of thing. Like he had that mind. He's like going to modify something no matter what at his earliest age. Who thinks that way?
Yeah. I was like scared when I got my first guitar. I remember I saved up and I got an SG. I think it was a 65 or 66, and I was afraid. I mean, I did some modification because that was kind of like that stuff was starting to happen. I put some ceramic magnets in the pickups. I got an Olympic hot rod kit and did that. And took the pickup covers off and whatever. But that was about the extent of it. Oh, and I remember it had the Maestro whammy just like Ed had on his 335. And I remember that I did bend the bar up higher so I could make it go lower,
Oh, nice.
Did you cut yours in half so you could only get the GB?
Never cut mine in half, but it has that leaf spring on it,
it's a
basically.
Brilliant idea though. If it would have worked a little better, like if he had a company behind him to do it at that time. It's a brilliant idea,
It was insane the fact that he got the hacksaw out. I mean, that was just like I didn't go that far,
Because that's how innovators work.
Years ago, I was afraid to even adjust my truss rod.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I took my guitars, all of them apart. I still have half my guitars I own are in pieces. I'm that bad guy.
Cool.
I guess that's where innovators
Eddie gave
come
us all
from. People
permission
that
to
take
do
stuff
that,
apart.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing with Ed is just, he didn't care. It's true. It is right from the beginning. I mean, he got that Tysco and it's just like too many pickups and switches. Screw it. And then it's like, I see this guitar, 12 strings, and then the next guitar he gets is the Les Paul, and it's like, doesn't have the right pickups, and he doesn't care about doing a nice, pretty looking job. He just gets probably a big old mallet and a chisel, and he's just like, and shove that in there until it fits, and I mean, just amazing. I mean, but that's the great thing about him is that he just, he really, and it's funny because you look at these pictures of these early instruments that he had, and almost every single one of them had some type of modification done to it. He just could not let anything be. Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that goes to your point about the OCD, that obsessiveness. That's, you guys both touched on that to open the conversation. I think that right there kind of sums it up.
Absolutely.
The other thing I noticed from that too is, like that he definitely exemplifies the, the standard of necessity, being the mother of invention. Because
mother of invention.
Him talking about when his mom was getting mad, or you guys talking about rather, I'm sorry, asking him, and he's saying, well, my mother would get mad, so I had this bandmaster, and I would take, the auxiliary input because, it would get that really quiet, which, sound which we all know which should have blown the transformer, but those little Fender ones were dynamo, take almost 600 volts on the, on the high current. And so he would do it that way, and he had like his own kind of weird attenuation thing going on. It's just genius, you know.
It's really, I mean, he just didn't care if he was going to blow something up, you know. But I mean, that's the interesting thing is like when Jose came into the picture, it doesn't really show up in the book so much because it was getting a little bit too far down the guitar nerd path. But you know, he got the Marshall, you know, in like 1970, basically is the best I could tell as much as a date. That's pretty damn early that he got that thing.
Yeah.
And he blew it up right away, you know. And what did he do to blow it up? You know, that's the amazing thing. It's a Marshall, you know. What was he doing? You know, and that's how he found Jose. It's like he took it to Jose and he repaired it for him, and that was kind of like the start of that. You know, and I'm sure he probably paid attention. Jose probably said, "Oh no, Ed, you cannot do that. You know, you blow the amplifier up." You know, and it's like, really? Oh, cool. I'll do that. You know,
that sounds like him.
Yeah.
Well, the other side of the genius angle on this is, besides that, is like the songs themselves. Though, I mean, it's, you know, without them, like Steve Vai kind of points that out, that he thinks that's what he's going to be remembered for. I agree, because you know what? You know, kids that are playing guitar just nowadays, his style, all his things that he added to the play, his techniques, they're in the vernacular now. They've been in there for 30 years, so it's nothing new to these kids nowadays, like it was to us. But the songs themselves, I mean, these songs are, I mean, look at their greatest hits album. It's like there's, you know, every song is generally on the radio. You know the song, you know what I mean? And just to think that, I mean, even in the later years, my impression was that he and Alex, he would write the songs, they would completely arrange them with the middle eight, the bridge, the beat part, complete it, and then they'd give it to whoever the singer was and say, okay, write words and a melody. But basically that music dictated the melody a lot of times too. Sure. I think it's like, I mean, who works like that really? Usually. So Alex, you know, everybody says, oh, how does Alex get writing credit on these things? Well, I think the two of them banged this stuff out and arranged it into complete songs that they handed off to these singers, which is was pretty amazing, you know, in itself. And I think that the catalog, I mean, is just incredible because of those songs. On top of his, you know, technical and his, you know, inquisitive nature of, you know, trying to get the sounds that he was looking for. But it just, I think that's a whole other part of the genius part of this whole thing. To your
point, John, I mean, you know, that's sort of the interesting thing that, you know, about Van Halen, and you could also say the same thing about Jimi Hendrix to some degree. I mean, we all, you know, bow down to them as guitarists, right?
Yeah.
But it's the vehicle is also super important for that, because, you know, there were a lot of guitar players that, you know, arguably are technically better than Ed or Jimi Hendrix. But, you know, the songs, the vehicles for their soloing, for their ideas was just as strong as their technical prowess.
Yeah, I always say, what is it about him that why are we so? I mean, what is it about this guy that so many people were just, you know, all these years later, we're still obsessing over, you know, all of it, the whole thing. It's just like, I still can't explain it. I don't think any of us can. I just, you know,
it's for Ed. I think it's, you know, he was a great songwriter, you know, and I think that's really where he succeeded, where a lot of other guitarists have failed. I mean, I love Jeff Beck's playing as much as anything, but do I really want to listen to his music all the time? Not really. You know, I go back to some of his albums and like, okay, they're interesting, especially from a guitar playing standpoint, but you know, it's the kind of thing that you know, we play for your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, and they kind of go like, can we change it? You know, it's something else now, you know?
Yeah, right.
You know, and that's the thing is that, you know, he really connected with people. You listen to, you know, how he was able to be super intense, how he was able to pick up the energy of punk rock, but at the same time, this incredible melodicism that went through. He never really let his virtuosity get in the way of a good song. And that's what I think was really remarkable about him. The fact that he could realize I could do something like Jump, you know, and it's not a guitar song, it's a synthesizer song, you know, and with a great solo in it. But, you know, he really was a composer. You know, he he was not just a great guitar player. And we have, Brad and I we deal with them all the time, great guitar players. And I mean, that's even like there's a period there, with the Mr. Biggs and the Extremes and whatever. And they said it's about the songs, and I think it really is.
Yeah,
people.
I think you guys captured that well in the book.
Yeah,
I think you guys
Van
captured
Halen
that.
appealed to such a wide audience. I mean, I saw it. I was a fan from the very beginning, and I saw like who showed up at the concerts and everything like that. And I went to concerts like 2-3 times a month. In the late '70s. And I can remember always looking forward when Van Halen was through town, because that's when all the hot girls would be out, like they had a substantial female following.
Yeah, they did.
And that's part of, that's why they have 2 diamond selling records, it's because they didn't just appeal to guitar dudes.
I almost feel like later in his life that I don't know that he resented the fans, not really resented them, but I think that he didn't want to do the same record again. And I think a lot of the fans just wanted the Unchained Part 2, Panama Part 2. And I think that when Van Halen 3 failed commercially, I think that really set him in a tailspin, because I don't think he ever experienced that kind of failure. And I think he was angry, and maybe it's just me, but I read into it as like, you know what? Now you get nothing. You know what I mean? I'll just go in my little clubhouse in the backyard and I'll just make myself happy, because I know even when they put those 3 new songs out on the Greatest Hits album, it's like, people would go take a piss, while those songs on, or they just stand there waiting for the next one. And I think, and I don't think he was the kind of guy that ever wanted to go on tour without a new album. You know what I mean? I think he was what he was into at the moment. And I think he was really disappointed in the fans for not wanting to come on that ride with him. And, Van Halen 3, for whatever you can say whatever about it, but there's some great guitar playing on that. There's some great ideas on it. I mean, if it had a real producer, maybe it would have been a better thing, and I, from what I understand, that whatever they did record with Sharon after that, there's some songs that are in completed stages or whatever, and that some of them are very good too. So I don't, I hope someday we get to hear some of this stuff, but I just think that he was kind of just let down and just disillusioned with maybe the fans not wanting to come along for the ride where he wanted to go next,
Well, Chris, you did that interview with Ed and Tony Iommi,
right?
And Ed expressed a little bit of that.
Yeah, he was very frustrated. What I saw from Ed, especially during those years, was just that he was just progressing so much. It's funny because he really had stopped listening to music pretty much in the mid '80s, like outside music. He used to have a very voracious appetite. It was interesting to know he used to listen to bands like Trapeze, and Harvey Mandel and all this other stuff that was kind of obscure even back in the '70s. And then all of a sudden he kind of reached this point in the mid '80s and he just stopped listening to anything but what he was doing. And I think he was really progressing. He was starting to get serious. He did a lot of playing cello, he played piano, played cello. Did a lot of this other stuff, and it's just like, but people want Eddie Van Halen, the rock star, kind of this pop rock guy, this party, the good time Van Halen's coming into town kind of thing. And he really wanted to mature and grow. And I think that was the problem with Van Halen 3, is that here he made an attempt to do that, and the fans said, we're not interested. And that really bummed him out, because I think he really wanted to grow and wanted to bring the fans along with him. And they were just kind of like, no, we want to go back to, it doesn't help that you change singers mid-course. Maybe if he had continued on that path with David Lee Roth, like we saw with Me Wise Magic and Can't Get the Stuff No More, it might have worked, but it's hard to say.
I feel like, it's crazy, but I almost feel like, the original Van Halen after 1984 almost had to implode, because I just feel like, when you burn that hot, it's just going to explode. And I almost feel like at that point, anything he would have done with Roth at that point would, it was kind of limited, I guess, because of obviously his singing range and stuff like that. So I almost, feel like he had to have a Hagar who could do things, because he had all this other stuff. And as we've seen, even some people don't like it, more keyboard stuff, but I feel like, and then I feel like the Hagar thing ran its course, because he says, okay, listen, the lyrics are kind of stupid, and, Sammy's a great singer and everything like that, but it's just bad. And Sharon's were a little more introspective, and his lyrics were a little better than Hagar's. And I think he had hoped that we would come along for the ride. I don't think he ever really recovered from that Obviously he got sick after that, but I almost feel like he was disappointed with the fans, but he said, listen, I want to play with my son. I'm just going to, hey, we got the Eagles manager. He's going to make all the money that we didn't make in the 80s because of our, poor whatever management or whatever. And, and I think he resented a little bit of that they should have been, they were the American Led Zeppelin. And I feel like he saw bands like Bon Jovi making, worth $250 million. I'm Eddie Van Halen, and I'm not, what's the deal? So I think when they hired Irving Azoff and brought him in, I feel like that was, hey, now it's time to, let's reunite. I'm going to get to play with my son. We'll give the people what they want, play these songs. But I just think that he had kind of checked out as far as, wanting to or trusting the fans to come for the ride with him and with what he wanted to do, which is really sad because I think there's probably a lot of music on those walls in that studio that, a lot of us who wanted to go for that ride may never get to hear,
Well, what the book tries to do, I mean, if we pull back in the sort of furthest kind of lens, is you sort of talked about this in the beginning of the show. It follows Ed on this arc, on this travel, and it's an arc that you sort of hear in all great stories almost. It's this rise from almost rags to riches of an immigrant story, and then all of a sudden he becomes this huge superstar. But there's certain things about that life and what he was doing that rubbed him the wrong way, and he was always searching for the next thing. And he gets to this incredible height, and then he decides, he doesn't want that. He wants to move in a different direction. He wants to try to do something new creatively. And we get Van Halen 3, which we should talk about more in depth. But that gets rejected by his fans for a bunch of different reasons, and by people. But then he's also hit with all these other crises, all these other problems in his life. Not only is he switching singers and finding it difficult to settle into that, but he gets he gets cancer. He's still dealing with his his various addictions and substance abuse. He gets a divorce, and all of these things together have a huge impact on his psychology.
Sure
I spent a few days with Ed during this period, and he was pretty frank about a lot of the things that he was going through in his personal and creative life. Now, any one of those things would probably stop any of us in their tracks. But all of these things together, create this massive inner turmoil that basically takes Ed away from us. I mean, after Van Halen 3, he doesn't record again for almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
And people forget about that. It's so surprising to me, that people don't say, oh, we lost 20 years of this guy, really. They would play live, or there would be a track on the greatest hits record or this or that, but you don't really get a record. And one of the things that we wanted to examine in the book is, again, what brings him to these points. And then, why does he stop? And thank God, again, towards the end, there is a redemption to the story. He does have a comeback. But I find those lost years completely fascinating.
Yes.
And Van Halen 3.
Yeah, let's get into Van Halen 3. Let's get into that. So so Ray Daniels spoke to you guys for the book, and he's been painted as this evil man. But when I read, him in there, he just seemed like a nice Canadian guy. Just pretty, like every Canadian guy that we've ever met. You know what I mean? He seemed like a real reasonable guy. Yeah. But then in the same hand, Michael Anthony, you spoke to him a few times in the book there too, and he's a whole other one. That fascinates me. That whole Michael Anthony thing. We'll get to that, but because he was very guarded about himself and Eddie and things like that. But he kind of came out a little bit at Ray Daniels and basically blamed him for Sammy leaving the band. But when I read the Ray Daniels part, he seemed very reasonable. He just wanted to, the band to be successful, and it was his job to, to try to keep them successful. But I think
it was, as they say, just sort of with Ray. I think he had their best intentions in mind. There were some just general communication issues because Ray was managing them from Canada, and they'd been used to having all this sort of hands-on attention from Ed Loeffler. So when Ray started getting involved with them, he was just managing them from a business point of view. He hadn't realized that he walked in the middle of the flat-out madness of Alex and Ed and Sammy and Dave and whatever. And I think he was also trying to just do his best working with them from across the country. So he didn't understand quite all the dynamics that went into it.
So, but that set up the failure in a way of Van Halen 3, because I think, it was like the old switcheroo. Sammy's out, Dave's back, and then all of a sudden Dave is gone. And the fans, I think, were like, well, screw you guys. This is, we're getting Gary Sharon. I don't think he ever got a fair chance. And I think Gary tried to be the good, and you spoke to him obviously in the book too. And he's always, anytime, Gary seems like a very honest, straightforward guy. Yeah, and he'll tell you how it was, you know what I mean? And I think he tells it how it is there. But just from our point of view, he tried to make Ed happy. He tried to accomplish whatever he wanted. Listen, Ed wanted him to sing, he was used to Nuno tuning down like they did for Roth, because Gary has good range, but it's not Sammy's range. But Ed tried to stretch him out on that record, and you could tell Gary was struggling on that album to hit those notes. You know what I mean? And but I think he wanted
the issue, though. We touch on this a bit, is that I think where Ed was at that time in his life was Ed always had a bit of a persecution complex. He always felt somebody was trying to prevent him from doing what he wanted to do musically, recording wise, etc. So when he went into Van Halen 3, he was determined this time he was going to have
full control
and hired Mike Post to produce. And Mike had he was a great songwriter, but had limited experience being a producer. And I think he sort of Ed brought him in to be a bit of a yes man to some degree. So I think that experience was valuable to Ed, because he later on in life realized, well, maybe he did need some of these people. Maybe he did need the pushback that he was getting from David or Sammy, or a strong producer like Ted Templeman. He had almost a little too much of his own way on Van Halen 3. But another way to look at Van Halen 3 is that, and this is the way I look at it, it could have been a great transitional record, because there's so many new ideas on it. And he was going to a new place, hadn't quite settled into it yet, but we might have, like his fans, we were probably too judgy. We should have given him a little bit room, and we could have had the blossoming of like stage 3 of Van Halen and gotten some really extraordinary material. But everybody had already put Ed in the box, and nobody was allowing him that record or two that it might have taken to take it someplace else different.
Yeah, I just
Brad,
don't get it. It's like he shut down. Sorry, Neil. It seems like he kind of shut down, because it's my understanding that even those half of A Different Kind of Truth, those new songs, were actually written in like 2001. They weren't like, it wasn't like he was actively. I thought they were brand spanking new stuff like that he was doing, but it doesn't seem like he was, as prolific with his song. I almost think, like I said before, I just think he was just like, I just think he lost interest in a way, maybe not, just with pleasing the fans anyway. You know what I mean? That's why I wonder what's on those walls and those tapes. I wonder if there's like some real, the next step after Van Halen 3, if there's that kind of stuff on those tapes,
Brad,
Or
you
is
got
there
to hear
more?
the music that they recorded. You got to hear some of the unreleased stuff that he did with Gary after Van Halen 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Kurt was asking that in the chat. As a matter of fact, he wanted to know if you guys had ever heard any of that. But I mean, I was just wondering if he kind of reined it in after that on that next, what would have been that next record that we never heard. If there was, like you're saying, hey, he might have learned from the Mike Post thing, saying, hey, maybe I do need a little pushback. I wonder if on that next record, if there was a little a realization of that, and then maybe, it was more friendly for the fans to, or would it have been? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Gary put it this way, which I think is probably correct. Is he felt like if they would have gotten the next record that they were making first, which was a more traditional sounding Van Halen record, and gotten the fans to sort of settle into the music a little bit, then the next record after that, he could have gone and pushed the envelope, and in some ways, even it's funny that even Gary himself felt like, maybe they pushed the envelope a little too hard with that first one. Yeah, I heard some of the music. I have to say, it still was a bit in demo form. It wasn't complete,
Mm-hmm.
So it was super hard to judge, although it was a little bit more, riff rock,
Accessible.
They definitely tried to recapture.
record,
They tried to recapture their original sound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
but
do you guys feel like at Eddie? Sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
Following up on that conversation, the book, all factions seem to kind of echo the same sentiment, that it was a really good working relationship during that album. Eddie loved the fact that for the first time somebody was giving him lyrics before music, and it challenged him in a new way and all this stuff. And then the album didn't sell well, so they fired him. Did you guys get any indication at all that there was ever a sense of maybe they jumped the gun, like from Eddie himself? Do you think he ever felt like maybe we jumped the gun and didn't let this play out as long as it should have?
That's a complicated question.
It's a complicated question. I think for Ed, it's just like the world kind of came crushing down on him afterwards. It's he did this record, it didn't do well, and then all of a sudden, next thing he knows, he has cancer. Yeah. His marriage is falling apart. It's all these things, kind of like the weight of the world was on it at that point. And I think Ed just wanted to just say, screw it, I'm just gonna disappear. I think he didn't even want to deal, really at that point. I think it was too much for him. What I know of Ed, I mean, he had very progressive tastes. He really wanted to do something serious. He really wanted to do something even beyond. I think Fair Warning was kind of a hint, at what he wanted to do, and he could have gone. I think that was kind of an interesting thing, because Fair Warning was kind of like the precursor to Van Halen 3, but it succeeded on a much better level. It's a great record. It's many, including mine, many people's favorite Van Halen album. Whereas Van Halen 3 it didn't quite. I guess he needed more of those pieces of the puzzle, like we talked about him needing a producer and everything. But yeah, I think after that, I think he was just kind of fed up.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate how few artists And I mean artist, not rock star. How few artists are allowed to kind of change and evolve? You know, off the top of my head, I can think of a small handful that are given permission by their fan base to go outside of the box. You know, I think of Prince. I think of Neil Young. I think, you know, there's a small handful of them that are kind of allowed to do it.
But even if these guys don't get real permission, I mean, like Neil, you know, or Prince, they were perfectly willing to have failures in order to pursue their vision.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really
and the thing that blew Ed's mind was that he had never experienced failure.
Yeah.
You know, everything that he tried to do, like it went from strength to strength. I mean, like what major band gets rid of their singer and gets to a new singer and gets, you know, has even a bigger record or bigger success, you know, that kind of thing. So I think, you know, I think Ed was, I don't think he'd ever experienced that, you know, in his career. So there was something
so good in the book. You cover all of that so good.
Yeah.
You know, Warner Brothers.
I just feel that way. It's sort of like Ed. He didn't quite wrap his head around it, so therefore he just took his ball and went home.
That's a great way of putting it.
Going back to Fair Warning, Brothers. You know, Fair Warning was considered by many a failure, and yet it went 2 times platinum. You know, its first year. You know, and it's like, and I think Ed even then was just kind of like, you know, well, it wasn't so bad. You know, it's like I got to experiment, and I still sold a bunch of records. You know, and I think that's what he kind of went into Van Halen 3 with, that kind of mentality, like.
Well,
hey,
1984 was also an experimental record too. I mean, to that end.
Yeah, if you think about it, the guitar doesn't come in until 2.5 minutes into the album.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's his masterpiece, and I think he got a taste of that during Fair Warning, and I really think 1984 was the fruition of like to me. I think I love Fair Warning, but I think 1984 is the apex album. It's my favorite. I love his tone on there. I just love the songs on there. I just think it's a perfect album. It has the jams, it has the pop songs, it has everything on that one album. So I think that's his real masterpiece. That I think that
absolutely,
that's the one, you know. But I mean, Fair Warning is my other favorite. It's 1A, you know what I mean? So
Fair Warning's a guitar player's record. I mean, for me, it's like it's got some really great guitar performances, but it kind of, you know, you even mentioned in the book, it kind of fizzles out at the end.
It does.
You know, it's kind of like it kind of, you know, boom, 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 and then kind of, I'm gonna just throw this stuff on there, you know, and the record's over with. But 1984 is just beginning to end. Every song's great. I mean, my favorite song all time, "Girl Gone Bad," is on that album. I think that's just such a representative of Ed, you know, because it's like there's a great melody in there, there's those harmonies in there, and then there's just these dynamics and these changes, and then this fiery solo, and it's jazzy and it's horny. You know, it's just crazy. It's over the top. And then he goes into those, you know, just he brings the volume down and everything. And it's just sweet, you know. And I think Ed wanted to explore more of that type of stuff. And it's just, again, I don't know. It's just, it's you know, I think, again, with Van Halen 3, he needed a producer. He needed to be reined in. He had a lot of really good ideas. You listen to the instrumental only version of that album, and it's like, it's a great guitar record. You know, but it's like all the pieces just didn't quite fit. You know, that was one case where he kind of it was a big misstep.
Yeah.
So what's your John? What's your favorite Van Halen song at the minute? I know it.
You know what? Yeah, it definitely changes, but I'll always go with "Girl Gone Bad" too. I just think that's the perfect. It's like the cream jam. It's got everything on it. I often wonder about that. I know that, you know, Eddie played bass on a lot of those songs. I remember hearing "Hot for Teacher" and the tapping part at the beginning. The bass was actually tapping too, but they removed that. Right. I have a theory on that. We'll get into the Michael Anthony bit in a minute. I feel like Eddie said, well, I'm the tapping guy. That's my thing. I'm not letting him get any credit. Like, you know, if we do that live, that's my thing. And I there was obviously a resentment for Michael Anthony there. We'll get to that in a minute. But I don't know. On a song like "Girl Gone Bad," though, I almost feel like Michael Anthony had to be playing that, because I feel that whole song was just live. It was just them. You know, you needed the bass player in there. Yeah. You know, for the changes. So I almost feel like maybe he did play on that. I don't know. You know, as I listen to it,
if you listen to like the demos for the first album, like the bass playing is phenomenal on that. It's one of the great losses is that, you know, as great as the Van Halen debut album sounds and everything, is that Michael Anthony was kind of just minimalized. But you hear the demos and you hear some great bass playing. And I've brought this up before, but it was a show I was at. It was San Diego, 1979, I think November 79. You listen to the live shows, you know, the early live shows, and Anthony's playing some really phenomenal bass. It's just great, you know, and he's going outside the pocket a little bit, but he brings it right back in. And he was really an underrated bass player, and he never really got to show what he could fully do on record.
It wasn't fair in a way. I just, you know, let's get into that a little bit, that Michael Anthony part of this whole story. You know, we all have a lot of thoughts on the whole thing. Obviously, there was some bitterness on Mike's end because, I mean, at the end, he had to know that Ed was dying, and he didn't reach out and contact to clear the air. So there must have been some resentment or some anger there, obviously, because, you know, Ed always played it off like, I think Ed was acutely aware, I don't know what you guys think, of the internet and what was being said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I remember that Klosterman interview in Billboard in 2015. And, you know, Ed, for a guy who last record he bought was Peter Gabriel, he knew an awful lot about Max Martin, the producer. You know what I mean? The Backstreet, he knew a lot. And that struck me too. And Klosterman picked up on that. And so I think he was aware of, and I think he was and Wolfgang was in the band, and he was going to defend Wolfgang. And I know he went out of his way to minimalize Michael Anthony, saying his voice is like a piccolo trumpet or something, you know, he said there. And his bass playing, like he had to show him how to play all this stuff. I mean, that had to be hurtful. And Michael, you know, and then it's funny because when in the book, when you'd have Ed speaking about certain things, I could tell when it was a newer interview with Ed, because he would take shots at Michael Anthony, you know, in there about his bass. I never liked his bass sound. I said, oh, that had to be from the 2010, 11 area. You know what I mean? That wasn't from, you know, in the 80s or late 80s or anything like that. But I just don't know where the animosity really started with Michael Anthony over the whole Sammy thing and the ridiculing of his playing, because Michael Anthony was a bass player. He was never a guitar player that became a bass player. So I think he approached the bass like a bass player would approach the bass. You know what I mean? He didn't overplay, and he knew and listen, Billy Sheehan, everybody says, oh, at one point during Fair Warning era, Billy Sheehan, they wanted him in the band. How long do you guys honestly think Billy Sheehan would have lasted in Van Halen with Ed? A year? You know, I don't think that would have been exactly bad, right?
Right.
So I don't think Ed realized that he had the perfect guy standing there. He didn't want the spotlight. He wanted you to have the spotlight, Ed. You know, he was, you know. But I just sense that Michael Anthony, there's got to be some residual bitterness, and that, you know, for so long, for, you know, all the things that allegedly they had done, made him sign away his rights to everything, all of this type of stuff, which, you know, it is fair, but I just don't know where that all started, and saying that he was lazy and things like that. But did you really think Michael Anthony would have brought a song in that Ed was going to want to record Michael Anthony stuff? I just think he was like a target for him. I mean, what do you guys think about all that?
Yeah, it's weird because he was kind of a punching bag. I guess there's always somebody in the band that you've got to, you know, blame. It's like they say, like, you know, the dog's the one that gets kicked down the end of the road, unfortunately, or whatever, in the family or whatever. But it just really, Ed was about family. I think that was the thing. And it was just kind of, I think he resented the fact that but again, I don't think he really appreciated what Michael brought to the band, because I think there was that point though, where it got to Fair Warning and 1984 and building the 5150 studio. And Ed was just such a workaholic. He was just like the mad scientist locked up in the studio 24/7. And Michael was a family guy. You know, he wanted to go home with his wife and enjoy life. He didn't, you know, the band wasn't the only thing to him. So did
Sammy.
Yeah, and Sammy, exactly. That's why Sammy ended up, you know, getting the boot too. It just, you know, Ed, again, he just.
Well, you know, I think Ed had, you know, I mean, we love Ed, but Ed definitely had his edge, and he had a bunch of different sides to him. And one of them was that on one level, he wanted control. But there was the other side where he resented he resented the fact that he had too much responsibility.
Hmm.
I think Ed had a really hard time. And again, you have to consider that at different points in his life, you know, he was dealing with substance abuse, and what was going on in his mind wasn't always maybe, you know, stacked up to the reality of the situation.
True.
No, he would regularly complain about, well, Mike didn't come in with any songs, or Mike didn't come in with any riffs or whatever. But the truth is as you guys pointed out, it's highly unlikely that they would have stacked up to what Ed would have wanted. Yes. So there were all these sort of complex dynamics. I don't think there was any sort of black and white thing. And I think that sometimes Ed really embraced what Mike did. And then sometimes it was just like, oh, that guy, I don't know, I had to write all these songs for the record, and he's getting a percentage of that. I don't like that. You know what I mean? So there were things like that would go on in his mind. But Chris brought up something the other day, which I thought was sort of a fascinating idea that we hadn't really discussed, which was that Mike was almost doomed the day that Wolfgang was born.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I want to elaborate on that.
Yeah. Well, that was. I can remember, you know, my interview, my first official interview with Ed was for the Balance album, November of 1994. And he just gushed about Wolfgang. You know, Wolfgang was all of a couple years old, you know, 2-3 years old at the time. But you could just, the emotion in Ed's voice talking about his son, and just, you know, oh yeah, he's, you know, already got a sense of rhythm, and, you know, this and that. And he said, I'm not going to push him into music, but Ed was going to push him into music. I'm sorry. You know, that it just, there was nothing that guy wanted more than to make music with his son. And his son, thank God, obliged and then some. You know, but it was inevitable. It was, I mean, that's why I think why David Lee Roth said it's like, you know, 3 parts original, 1 part inevitable. Right. Because it's like, you know, once Wolfgang was born, it's like he's going to be in this band, you know, come hell or high water.
I think you said that it was just Mike's. It was the bad luck of the draw that he didn't end up being a good singer.
Yeah, exactly. It was. That was the thing. If Wolfgang, you know, had this phenomenal set of pipes, you know, and this crazy over the top personality, you know, I mean, because Wolfgang can sing, we've seen that, but I think that was the thing. It was like an easy thing for him to slot into, was the bass. You know, it's just like, hey, you know, this role's the most expendable one. Hey, you fill it, you know, and that just, it's, yeah, I'm sure that Michael Anthony probably saw the writing on the wall at some point, you know, with that.
You know, I spoke to Mike for this book, and I have to say, and I don't think he was, you know, fibbing about this in any kind of way. I think Ed's attitude towards him, Ed and Alex's, and Dave's at one point, I don't think he really understood it. You know, I mean, you see that in the interview in the book, like, you know, it was more like him saying, well, they needed somebody to pick on. When everybody got frustrated, like, it was almost like Ed couldn't really attack his own brother. He wouldn't do that. And David or Sammy were almost too powerful for him to get into huge arguments. So I think just when they were frustrated, like, oh, there's Mike over there, let's beat up on him for a while, just to get this out of our system.
Wow.
So it doesn't paint a very nice picture, but I think to some degree, you know, if you're confused about it, Mike's confused about it. I don't even think it's particularly clear in Ed or Alex's or any of their minds, you know, why Mike Anthony sort of, you know, got the short end of the stick.
And ironically, he's the guy trying to protect the legacy of that band he will not say anything. He's very guarded about everything he said. I mean, to his credit, he could write a book, you know what I mean? He was there for everything. Think about it, right? From the beginning to the, and he just protects the legacy of the band, to his credit. So, I mean,
he's Switzerland.
Yeah, his loyalty to that is pretty amazing. You know?
But also, you do have to say that Mike is incredibly fortunate
Yes.
for being a guy that was there and getting, you know, equal
somebody's got to
on the first 6 records. You know?
Somebody's got to be, right.
You guys give him justice in this book, you guys. You give him a lot. You give him not one, but 2 interludes, 2 parts it took, and that's unique to the book.
Well, that was important to me was because there were 2 Mike's relationship with the band evolved.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You know.
Yes.
Hey, Charles. So, what's your favorite Van Halen song?
I got to tell you guys, I've always loved "On Fire." And I know it's very simple, but I told you guys the story once before. I saw it. I've seen him.
One of the greatest guitar songs of all time.
When he played his solo at the Forum, the guy standing next to me, his face literally melted off. I told that story many times, and it left an impression. You know, it left a big impression. Look, you guys, this book, I've said it all week long. I've been reading it. I've read a couple of chapters twice. It's got Easter eggs, huge nerd Easter eggs. Look, I'm going to make an epic comparison here, and I'm going to do it right now. This book to a Van Halen fan is like a Bible. All right. It's got it all. If you needed one book that you were going to expect to buy to learn something about any member of that band, you guys don't even play favorites. The book's about Eddie.
Yeah.
But you do justice. Look, you guys don't pull any punches in this book. You pull 0 punches, but you do justice, and you do justice with respect to every single person that you talk about in this book.
Well,
0 disrespect to anybody.
That's sort of the idea, is like, what is the psychological underpinnings that cause these different behaviors? You know, they weren't all just isolated. You have to almost go back to when Ed's 12 to understand why he has a disagreement with David Lee Roth, you know, so many years later.
Mm-hmm. And you could look at it through Dave's eyes, and you get a different story to that mountain. It's this book is an emotional roller coaster. I cried like 2 or 3 times reading it. I'll just throw it out there. Hey, what do you want? These guys are all human. These guys are all human. I've been fortunate enough to meet a couple of them. Yeah. Wonderful memories for me.
The thing is that they are human. You know, we wanted to present that side of him because that's the Ed that we knew.
You did it. You did it.
And Ed wasn't, you know, he was a rock star, but he was never comfortable with being a rock star. I mean, he was a rock star to the world, but to Ed Van Halen, he was Ed, you know? Yeah. And I love the guy because he was really incredibly modest, very forthcoming, very human, fragile, but at the same time, intensely stronger than anybody you could ever know.
Incredible human being.
Yeah. And, you know, there's all these books out there, and they are very sensational and whatever. And we don't need to know about necessarily the dirtiest of his laundry to really know him.
No.
You know, and
but you know what you guys do? Oh, I don't mean to cut you, but there's one part of this book that is just the best darn part. The Lost Years is a chapter. I believe it's chapter 7. It's called The Lost Years. And you focus in on that section of when he just reclused, went into 5150 and just, that's where he was. And the beginning of the chapter, it's the first, I believe, actually it's on page 224. And Sammy's there waiting for him for an hour at 5150, and Ed finally shows up. And the description you give of Eddie Van Halen, I've never heard it in my whole life. It is absolutely heartbreaking. And I'll leave the description for people to read. To a Van Halen fan, it's gold. It's gold. And that's what I want to hear. As a fan of Van Halen, as a fan of that band, and all members included, I don't expect them to have sanitary lives. Yeah. I know they don't. I know they don't. And you guys just give the out of the park, you guys. Yeah. Out of the park.
The best part of that is the redemption that follows that, though. Yes. Really, because you know, how would it end if that would just, you know, if it ended, that would just be a terribly sad, horrible story. But it's not. It's not, though. You know?
You guys, I'll tell you on a personal level, So, I spent a good deal of time with Ed during some of those difficult years, and I worried about him. I was wondering if he was going to be able to pull out of that tunnel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I hung out with him a couple of times towards the end, and he had become Ed again.
You were so fortunate to see that.
And that was an incredible thrill, because I've known through many years of Guitar World certain rock guys that never pulled out of it, pulled out of that tailspin.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to see Ed come back and be happy, and working with his son and actually making good music, and I think they would have continued for sure.
Yes. Yes.
So that is an encouraging part. But I think also I think what distinguishes our book from some of the other things that are out there, other than hopefully giving the reader some psychological understanding of how we get to these different places throughout his life, is that we also try to never lose track of the music. And and sometimes that stuff's not the easiest for a layman to understand, but we're all guitar guys, right? And Ed, if at the end of the day, was a freaking guitar guy.
Yep.
I mean, he was the guitar guy, the obsessive guitar person.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure that that audience was served as well. And Chris Gill did some incredible scholarship, freaking blew me away. Like about the some of the early days of the creation of the Frankenstein and Ed's amplification. And I didn't know some of this stuff, mostly of how much Ed's whole thing, the playing, the amplification, the tapping, the techniques, came together in that 3 or 4 months before the first album was recorded. Chris, it'd be great if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, just the thing is, I've been obsessive as anybody out there. I listened to the bootlegs. I've collected the bootlegs. I've gone through every early photo I can find, and just trying to piece things together, and to finally track some of these people down, the photographers, and find out, oh, this was actually this date. That sort of thing was, and just starting to realize, it's like, wow, it's like, like how many times have you heard, if you guys have heard the early bootlegs out there, you've heard Eruption, you like wonder, where's the tapping?
Yeah.
And you don't really start to hear that till the summer of '77. That you really hear that fully formed, thing that we hear on the record. You hear bits and pieces of stuff here and there. And, I guess it's frustrating, because it's like, I've read these stories. I mean, one thing I was obsessed with, just to go off on a little sidebar here, was like the whole story of it raining on the night that they were discovered by Ted Templeman. And I went and looked up the weather records in Los Angeles, like every city around, to see, was it raining that night? And it's like, what night was it exactly? I didn't trust anybody's memory on that, and I think the most telling point for me was actually finding an LA Free Press article that was like mid-February '77, saying Van Halen just signed a deal with Warner Brothers. And that said, okay, I guess Ted was right that it was on, February 2nd that he signed them. But, it's just, that stuff got me thinking about, well, when did the Frankenstein actually get built? When did Ed start doing this? When did Ed start doing that? And it was really fascinating, because it's like, you listen to the Warner Brothers demos, and again, you don't really hear much tapping on the demos. It's 25 songs. I mean, it's an acapella Happy Trails, but still, it's like, okay, there's 24 guitar songs on there. And you don't really hear this flamboyant display of what many have considered one of Ed's most revolutionary contributions to, virtuoso guitar playing. Then all of a sudden you start to really hear it at these live shows. And then, of course, even Eruption is not even supposed to be on the first album, and
wow.
Ted overhears him practicing for a show at the Whiskey in mid-September, and says, "Put that on the record."
Wow.
But I find that fascinating. Like his sound just really started to come together. His guitar, the Frankenstein in the form that we know and love it wasn't really done until the middle of July, 1977. With the neck on it and the Gibson pickup and whatever. He had gone, and it wasn't even that long before that. It was really February that we first see the body. But I just found that fascinating that, thank God that Bill Aucoin passed on signing Van Halen when Gene Simmons did the demos with them, because the Van Halen we all know and love probably would not have come to be.
Wow.
And I think Ed just got really motivated. It's like, okay, now we're signed to a big label. This is my chance to make a statement. And I think the guy just woodshed it. I think he just went in there and just really just ripped it up.
Yeah, it was sort of like there was like 3 months there.
Yeah.
Where Ted had signed the band to Warner's, or the band had been signed to Warner's. And then Ted was doing a Doobie Brothers record.
Right.
So he had to finish that up. So there was this 3-month period that it sounds like Ed was now really thinking about, okay, I'm going to record this record. I have all these ideas. I can't screw around. I really have to pull my ideas together and make it happen for this record. And that's where you really see like some of these techniques. And again, the Frankenstein itself being built is during those, we sort of narrowed it down to those 3 or 4 months before the record's recorded. So it's not like, 2 years before or 2 years out. It's right there, man, where it all comes together.
So we got to thank the Doobie Brothers for that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that, and then it was just great to think of, like, the Van Halen brothers, the Van Halen, well, Roth and
that's the speech for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. With Roth and Ed and Alex slumming at the Whiskey and going to check out the punk rock bands, and that turning into Atomic Punk, and Loss of Control. And gosh, what was the other song? Oh, Ain't Talking About Love. Oh my gosh, it's like that was their response to punk. I mean, it's there's hardly anything punk about those songs except for the attitude and the energy. But to think that came from that period there, and just some other of the just again that downtime. They wrote Jamie's Crying. It's like they realized we don't really have a hit. Even though there's some great songs on the record, but it's like, okay, we've got You Really Got Me, but that's a cover, and it's like they went and they wrote Jamie's Crying. It's just like, it's amazing to think that, it's a blessing that they had that little bit of delay in there. You guys know about the Dills?
Yeah.
No.
With the white and black guitar.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Les Paul with the
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, you guys, I don't know if you know John Burgess, Johnny B Guitars.
Yeah.
But, he's done
Great
some
videos.
amazing stuff.
Great
and
videos.
love his video.
I think he just did an interview with Chip, I understand, but we've gone back and forth about stuff.
Chip
But
from the Dills.
but it's like it's so funny to think that I did the timeline. We've got Chip.
Chris, just for the people out there listening that might not be familiar with it,
Sure.
What we're referring to is, in the book we talk about where Ed might have gotten his classic stripe design for his guitar.
Yeah.
And some of it is Ed was from Holland and he is Dutch, and there was a school of painting called the De Stijl School that relied a lot on symmetrical designs, and we think that Ed probably, at least consciously or subconsciously, was influenced by that.
And it was all black and white.
Very cool.
Well, there was
Primary colors.
There were some other colors, but it was all primary colors, right? So there's a little bit on that, but Chris sort of brought this to my attention that there was a guitar player also around the time when Ed was playing in LA. This guy named Chip that played with the Bills. And Chris, you think that Ed got some inspiration from that, right?
It's just the timeline is just, it's too close for comfort is all I can say, because I went and dug up some fan magazines. There's Slash magazine, was a famous punk rock magazine. And this issue was like, it was like the Rosetta Stone of it all to me, because it was the August 77 issue of Slash magazine. And there's a picture on the back, and it's Dave, Ed, and Alex in their punk rock get-ups. It's on the very back of the cover, and it says like something like, Hollywood Rock and Rollsville, whatever, or something like that. But I was just like going through this whole issue and reading it, and there was this review of these punk rock shows at the Whiskey. And they talk about, like this 3 nights in a row, there was all these punk rock, kind of a punkapalooza basically that they had. And they mentioned in the middle night, it's like, and Van Halen was there in what they considered, punk rock attire or whatever. It's kind of a mocking thing about it, but whatever. It's like, oh, there's a mention of Van Halen. Well, guess what? The Dills were on playing at one of those 3 nights. And you know for sure that Van Halen didn't just show up one night. They probably showed up at some other nights. And Chip, it's well documented in Up in Smoke. They had the Battle of the Band scene that was shot in early June of 1977. Chip's playing this white Les Paul with the black electrical tape on it and the crisscrossing patterns. Yep, there we go.
Oh, there it is.
That's it. With the communist, the
watched it last week.
Hammer and sickle thing, and but it's the Dills are in there. There's a picture in that issue of Slash of Chip with that guitar. And I was trying to think, well, when's the earliest picture of the Frankenstein with the black and white striped finish? And the best I was able to determine was this girl named Kat Haynes, who also famously shot Van Halen. Yeah, shot Van Halen at Magic Mountain as well, which is another early shot. But she had said that it was at the Whiskey in the middle of July, like July 15th or something like that. And there's another photo that no one ever had a date for. We've all seen it, I'm sure. It's a famous shot of Ed in this black and white striped shirt that he's on the inset of the Van Halen 1. That he's wearing that shirt and these silver stacked heels and black satin pants. And he's got the Frankenstein. Frankenstein has 2 knobs on it. And I figured that's from either that same show or that same set of 2 shows that they did. But that's like 2, maybe 3 weeks after Ed sees the Dills at the Whiskey. Wow. And it's like, that Ed went home and the wheels are turning. And he's like, that's cool, but I can do something cooler than that, because that's just the way Ed was. It's like, I'm not going to use electrical tape. I'm going to paint the motherfucker, Yeah. And it's just, like I said, it's so close in the timeline. It goes from June to late June that the Dills are playing at the Whiskey. And then middle of July, Ed shows up with this black and white striped guitar. And again, these photos in Slash magazine, just like they were there. There's a eyewitness account. Van Halen was at these shows. They were seen. There's a picture of them on the back cover in their punk attire, and you can kind of just put everything together and just say if this was a court case, you'd just say okay, case closed. Yeah.
Yep.
But again, the stripes, everything, the playing, his sound, a lot of the tapping techniques.
It was like
just explode.
They just did the whole package. It's just like, man, it's just like what a twist of fate. The sound, the look, everything. It's just like, I just remember, when the first Van Halen album came out, just how blown away I was just by. I knew they were like this band from LA. I heard them, when they did a sneak peek of them on KMET in January of 1978, just before the album came out, the famous story about them having to rush it out because of Ed playing it for Angel, and them having to put it out early. But I was just like, gosh, where's this? I was down in San Diego and for Keith Campbell, Fallbrook is where I grew up. But I remember hearing, them on the radio, and they were just such a mystery. It was like this mystery band. Where did they come from? And then to hear the album, and then I went to the store the next day after they played it on the radio. I heard it on the first night they played at KGB, and I went to the record store, and it's just like, I'm looking at them, and it's like, man, this band is just over the top. It's like, David Lee Roth is doing that crazy bend back and everything like that. And Ed's got that cool looking guitar. And Michael Anthony looks like his bass is on fire, you know, and that drummer, man, he's just.
They were the pride of Los Angeles, you guys. Los Angeles. Then they became the pride of California. We had to share them.
And I was just like, what was
it's
I
weird.
missing?
They really weren't Hollywood guys, though, right? They didn't consider they are like outsiders, right? To Hollywood, right? They were Pasadena guys, right?
Pasadena and Outlands, you know. Yeah, they were in LA.
It was always Hollywood, so you know.
Yeah, right, exactly. He made up for it, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So
you guys got to spend some time with Bill Gazzari, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Did you?
I did back in the day, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd love to spend some time with you guys and just sit and talk about the old days. That would be so cool.
Yeah. Well, I was in Hollywood, as I was mentioning before we got started. You know, I worked for Neil Bogart at the early '80s. You know, for Boardwalk Records with Joan Jett and Night Ranger, and you know, kind of saw the whole hair metal thing happening. You know, tried to get Motley Crue signed. You know, watched that all kind of just bubbling under, and that was the aftershock of Van Halen. You know,
so Charles, how much time did you spend in Gazzari's basement?
I was there from the middle of 1980 to the 1st of March, and February, March of '82.
I'm asking you what you saw in Gazzari's basement.
Hey, listen, I got to spend a little time with Bill here and there. Mario Maglione was my boss. And I love him. I still, to this day, I used to call Louis every 10 years and talk to Louis. You guys know Louis. And I used to call and talk to his nephew all the time. I haven't called him about 12. It's been maybe 13 years since I spoke to him. And
Neil, what does Charles tell you off the record, off the camera, about what he saw in Gazzari's basement? That's what I want.
I tell some stories from time to time, and I'll tell you, I'm so glad I got you guys here to back me up, because I know you will. You guys remember those old days very clearly.
That's why I'm surprised you're still here.
Thank you. That's it. I remember.
I'll tell you guys what, Brad and Chris, it's funny because every guest we have come on the show on Halenville, Charles has a story with them somehow.
Yeah.
Neil, what's your favorite Van Halen too?
Guys, you guys, I'm going to say this, between you guys and Rosen, you guys were all gentlemen. You were very well behaved, and you guys were telling that story about the Motley Crue signing, and the bouncer coming up with Nikki, and I'm so glad it wasn't me. Yeah. I'm so glad I was there. That was George, and he was a really good guy, but I'm glad it wasn't me.
When you said he was a big guy, I got worried because Charles is not of small stature. So I'm like, oh no, it was Charles.
Look, I've been reading you guys I just want to say thank you for letting me on here. This is bucket list stuff for me. I've been a fan of you guys. You know, between you guys and Rosen, a lot of your work has been, I'm just going to say, a lot of people have stolen your work and used it and rewritten it and used it for themselves.
We're well aware.
You go-to guys. You are the go-to guys between you and Rosen. If you want the true word, the true story, as best as it can be told. And the thing about you guys is what you've done. You've taken all of this stuff that you did for the last 3 decades.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have the backstory. And we also have the Polaroids. So. Exactly.
And you've blended it. When I say that you've done justice to this, everyone you speak about in this book, you've done them justice, and you've been honorable in it, and you haven't sensationalized. You could have gone a whole lot worse. You guys have stuff that you have been wonderful enough not to tell, because you didn't need to.
No, that's the thing.
Just enough to where everyone gets it and they get the feeling of who Eddie was and who everything was that he did. For one of the greatest bands in the world, man. Thank you, you guys.
Thanks. Well,
appreciate
Ed was a friend. You know, that's the other thing. You know, is that he was a friend. You know, he wasn't a rock star. He wasn't this guy that we do the interview with, and you hang up the phone, or you walk away from the interview, or whatever, and that's it. You know, Ed was involved. As I mentioned in my tribute to him, even, it was kind of unusual for me at Guitar World there in the latter years, that how involved Ed was in the stories that I wrote. We would go back over the stuff. I would do the interview. I'd write up my story. I would send it over to him. He would go through it and tell me what he was comfortable with. You know, if there's something he wasn't comfortable with, because he was afraid, like, you know, maybe at the time he was talking to me, he was wasn't sure, or he just was expressing his mind, but then he thought about it later and thought, that's going to hurt somebody's feelings. Maybe I shouldn't go there.
Yep.
And a lot of it was also, he would just embellish stuff. He would just say like, well, hey, I left out that detail. Let me fill in the blanks here, and everything. And that was really cool because he really cared. And I think that's the thing.
I can tell you sort of a funny story. But I did this one interview with Ed, and some of it was also like he wanted to make sure that we were accurately capturing his voice. Like he would read quotes and he'd say, I don't really sound like that. Here, let me phrase it more like this because this will sound more like me. Change the content, but he wanted to present himself in an authentic way. So it was interesting. We were going back and forth on this one story, and I'd done the interview out in Los Angeles over 5150, and then I went home to New Jersey with home to my wife and kids, and I'm eating dinner one night, and Ed calls me on the phone, and he goes, "Hey man, I want to talk to you about a couple things in the story. I want to get the tone right, like I just want to get the quotes, like sounding like myself, how I sounded." And so we had this long, interesting conversation, and then he's like, so my family's like, we're at the dinner table and they're hearing me talking to Ed, right? And at one point, Ed's like, they don't exactly know who the hell I'm talking to, right? So at one point, they're like, Ed goes, so I love you, man. Like, and so he was expecting me to reciprocate, right? So I'm like, yeah, I love you.
Oh, that's looking at me
like, who are you talking to? My wife's like, I don't think he's told me he's loved me in the last.
I'd have looked right at my wife and said, Eddie Van Halen loves me.
I love
How
you,
many
man.
kisses on the lips have you got?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Definitely like you'd offer a cheek and then he'd grab your face.
Right.
Plant it right on the lips. So
let me ask you guys a question. So, when did first of all, when you'd go up to 5150, the legend has it that, I guess he'd sit people in the control room and he would play the new album, whatever. And he played it so loud. Like, is that your guys' experience with that? Was it incredibly loud? And would you conduct the interviews in the control room or in the lounge? Where would you go to do the actual interviews? And was it really that loud when he blasted to the monitors, the album? Would you listen to the whole thing before you spoke to him?
Well, it was definitely, loud is relative to a guitar player. Come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's loud. Yeah, it was loud. But we do interviews with him. I would do interviews with him, in the control room if it was an album related interview. When we did the one for Guitar Aficionado, that was actually done in his office at 5150. So that was again, that was just great. I mean, the studio was like littered with guitars, so we had to go into another room basically to do that, which was just amazing. But yeah, generally it was, any number of places. I also did the interviews with him out on the road too. So sometimes it'd be at his hotel, wherever, Atlanta, or backstage in Bethel Woods, or any number of other places. But yeah, generally, if it was a new album thing, it was, get ready, bring the earplugs or take it off and be prepared to have your ears ring for 3 days.
There you go.
All right. I got some lightning round questions here too. So Ed claimed that to one of you guys, and it's in the book too, that he had retired the Frankenstein guitar by the time 1984 was being recorded. So I have an ongoing thing with a few people on the internet, because there's no photos of the 5150 Kramer in the, with Neil Zlozow or whatever his name is. There's no photos of that guitar in the studio during the recording of the album. My thought was, maybe he didn't want people to see it. We know it was backstage at the US Festival. There's one picture of it there, but I figured hey, maybe he just wanted to spring it on everybody on the tour. He had it at the rehearsals and didn't want people to see it, early. But do you think that he used the 5150 Kramer on the 1984 songs that he used with a Floyd on it? And for everybody out there, I'm not going to give it away, but for everybody who wants to know anything about the Flying V, you guys spoke to him, and a little nice, interesting tidbit about that guitar in the book too. So all you guitar guys out there, and his old Les Pauls and stuff. But anyway, what is your thoughts on that? And I'm sure you guys have gotten to play these guitars. I know, the Frankenstein and things like that. A lot of us, I love the Frankenstein. I first time I saw Van Halen, that's what he was playing. But I just love the Kramer 5150, and I think that's a lot of guys seem to like that. Was that guitar heavy? Do you think that was a JB in there? The pickup was a neck, like a thin, a C-shaped neck? What can you tell us about that guitar too? And do you think that was on 1984 on Girl Gone Bad or something like that?
I'm pretty sure it was. The Zlozow pictures are a snapshot of a period in time, and it could be any number of reasons that Ed didn't want it seen, or he just forgot, or he had it on the bench and he was tweaking it or doing something. It's highly possible that's it. But I don't know. It's really hard to say, because Ed did love the Frankenstein guitar, and it does, it was his main instrument, through all these legendary albums. But that with that 1984 interview, that was later on, and he had no reason to. It wasn't like he had to promote Kramer or anything by that point. So there was nothing in that for him, no added benefit. So I believe that was true. Regarding the guitar, I got to hold it. I didn't really get to play it. So I can't really talk too much about how the neck felt or anything. The weight on it was relatively light. The pickup, because we were going through 50 guitars, so I only had like a quick, couple minutes to look at it. Looked like a JB to me. But I can't say with definitive, positivity, because pickups being pickups, you really got to take them out and, look at the back plate and all these other nuts and bolts and everything. But it's a phenomenal guitar. I was blown away by seeing that as much as the Frankenstein. It's just and to see the wear and tear on it, and that broken piece on the headstock up there and everything like that. It's just
so cool.
Yeah.
It would be great if someday there was like some type of display of the tools of the destroyed 335 all the way up to the Wolfgang.
Yeah.
I'm giving you guys a little, maybe you can make this happen, like the Play It Loud thing again. In some type of museum from that point A to the end, to Z there with the Wolfgang, the fruition of his tinkering. And wouldn't it be great to see all these guitars in one, like a museum exhibit or something like that?
That was
because it's a shame.
I wouldn't put that out of the question.
Yeah,
I played the Frankenstein, through the Marshall.
Was it heavy?
I thought it was a little heavy, to be honest with you. Like it surprised me. It felt heavier than like a typical Strat or something like that. And I remember, like, we're going back a good 25 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. So it's a little hard to remember, but I do remember thinking, oh, this guitar feels pretty freaking substantial. You know what I mean? And I don't remember the action on it being that slinky. I mean, I remember it having a little bit of a fight to it, but I don't know. Maybe Chris, you played more of his. It wasn't like Stevie Ray Vaughan or something like that.
No, not even close. But the weight of the guitar, I would say lighter than a 70s Strat. So it's probably in that range of like a kind of a, it wasn't featherweight. But it was more, it had substance to it, definitely, but it was more like a good, like probably mid to late 60s kind of Strat weight, if you know what I'm talking about. But it wasn't a bomb, you know, like a 70s Strat was.
Yeah.
I think when Obrecht, you know, talked about, you know, when he had it with Ed that first time and talking about it, you know, I think that was his perspective was, you know, you're dealing with late 70s Les Pauls and Strats and everything, and those are pretty heavy, you know. So when he said it was a light guitar, I think, yeah, relative to a 70s Strat or a 70s Les Paul, but it was definitely, I'd say probably about my best guess, and this is again memory, but probably, you know, towards the high 6s, towards low 7s.
That's heavy.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. So, you know, Ed in the book says a lot of people say, "Oh, Eddie had huge hands," but he says in your book that he doesn't have big hands. No. And I shook his hand, and I don't remember it being very big, but I feel like he was like, you know, like a rat or something, or a mouse. You know, they'd have cartilage instead of bones because you know the ice cream man stretch. It's just you know, for a little guy, he wasn't a big guy. And I mean, I feel like, and he even talks about his thumb bending back in the book with you guys. But to get that kind of stretch up there, you know,
exactly.
You have it too. You have it too. So, so I feel like, you know, I think a lot of the key between the Marshall, you know, back then without the high gain amps, and you had to work at it, you know, to get the sustain and just, so I feel like he had a heavy, like, fingers, like, were very strong to like slap them on that fingerboard, you know, to squeeze out that tone. And I think that, you know, benefited him because
a freaking animal.
Well, very aggressive.
He didn't play casually at all. Whenever he picked up his guitar, like he dug in, you know.
Right.
I can't vouch for his, you know, it's sort of weird. I have this, listen, I'm not comparing myself to Eddie Van Halen on any freaking level. But what was weird is we both have these weird thumbs. And I think because when I was a kid, I didn't have really anybody to show me how to hold a pick properly. I got into the idea of holding my pick sort of like he does with the 3 fingers, you know.
Right.
I think it came from like holding a pencil or something. So it just naturally held on to the pick that way.
It's funny you say that because I'm the same way. I hold a pick with my thumb and my middle finger.
Yeah, me too.
I find it's more solid that way. But Ed was his own overdrive pedal. You know, he didn't need an overdrive pedal because his attack was so fierce. You know, it's just like he pulled, and you know, I don't want to compare myself to him either, but it's like I think that's one thing I found in common with him is like when I started playing, I wore frets down on my guitars, you know, in a year, you know, just because I just had this death grip on the neck, you know, and the pick and everything like that, and it didn't help me out.
Excellent.
A key to his playing, though, I think that was that attack, that aggressive attack. I mean, because you know the plexi or whatever, it just didn't have that. You know, even with the Variac or whatever, it didn't have that sustain like the high gain stuff does now. Right. And I think that, you know, he would squeeze that. It seemed like out of there. You can hear it on Van Halen 1, Van Halen 2. There's like in a Little Dreamer. There's a part where it kind of farts out the note, but he's just like making it happen at that point. You know.
Yeah. Always when people say like I played through a plexi and whatever, and I don't sound like Ed. And it's like, well, because you've got to play that thing like, you know, like Charles Atlas. Got the power chord.
You got to play.
You know, it's like you have to abuse the guitar. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I wrote that book, you know, on Jimmy Page, and I had the great fortune of meeting Page and hanging out with him and playing guitars and stuff. And he was just the opposite. Like I would like look at it like, dude, how are you? He seems his touch is so light with the pick and with his hands. It was just interesting on that level. But Ed, it was like I never saw Ed play the guitar casually. Like he always, whenever he picked it up and amplified or not amplified, it was always with a certain purpose that he knew exactly what he was doing and where he was going. Yeah.
I noticed that his hands weren't very big. I'm sorry, Neil, but they weren't big, but they weren't very dainty either. He looked like he worked with his hand. You know what I mean? They were like kind of like paws in a way. They weren't like they're callous and like being, you know. They weren't like, you know, like some people like dish rags. You shake their, you know, it seemed like it was substantial. His hand, you know, but it always amazed me though, because the stretches that he would do, and for a guy who was about 5'8", and it may look easy, you know what I mean? But so just a freak of nature, I guess. You know?
I was just going to jump in and say, I've seen the interview. I don't know if you guys have seen it, where Tom Weber talks about when he got the audition to be Ed's guitar tech, and he said one of the after 2 or 3 people, 4 people had tried to tune Ed's guitar and got turned down, Tom started thinking outside the box. He's like, okay, well, everybody can tune a guitar, so what are they all doing wrong? And what he realizes, it's the way when Ed plays with such a clamp vice grip on the neck, he's going to bend the note farther then. So he created like this unorthodox tuning to get it to sound right. So to you and I, if we were to strum it, it would sound like it's out of tune. And when he gave it to Ed, he played it and he said, wow, you're the first person that's gotten that right. And that's all based on his attack and his grip.
Yeah. Plus, Ed had a kind of a tempered tuning too. That's the other thing. It wasn't. Right. It wasn't. You just can't go and through a standard electronic tuner and A440 and whatever. Ed liked the B, as he's mentioned often. The B flat. But that's the funny thing, because Tom Weber did tell me like this secret tuning. And it got cut out of the Guitar World article because of space, but it ended up online. And now, of course, it's been picked up by Peterson and everything. And it's actually, there's a guy, I think his name's Alan or something like that.
Alan Garber. Yeah. He's the guy that I argue with about the Frankenstein and the 5150 on 1984. Alan's and he does amazing transcriptions. He's the man. He really is. But he's big with the tempered tunings there. And he's telling everybody, go get this Peterson pedal. Just get it. You know what I mean?
But that is part of the key to sounding like Ed too. Why so many players don't sound like him is because it's sweetened.
Absolutely.
He's got that, and he complained about, like, I don't remember if that made the book or not, but he was talking about like Girl Gone Bad, about playing it live in 2012 and how he hated to play that because the B just always sounded wrong to him and everything like that. And
again, going back to the interview with Steve, that was like Steve Vai. He said the first thing that sort of grabbed his attention was when he heard Run with the Devil, was how beautifully in tune the guitar was. Us mortals, right? We would take it for granted, but Steve just couldn't believe how well tuned that guitar was, and it was because Ed was, again, you have to remember, who's also a piano player,
right.
And guys that tune the pianos, they
good pitch.
Don't tune it. Yes, you tune it via this.
Yep.
Yeah. So next thing, Eric Clapton. So it seemed almost like Ed had a love-hate relationship with Clapton. Obviously, we know he was his idol when he was in Cream, but then when Ed did that album with Brian May, and Clapton basically shit on him and said, "Oh, that's the blues. He's a horrible blues player." And then Ed responded, "Well, then you're a shitty teacher." It was something to that effect. But I feel like after that, I don't know if Clapton kind of blew him off or dismissed him or what, but he was always after that, seemed like very flippant or critical of Clapton after that. And he made sure he pointed out that after Cream, he sucked, basically, that in his opinion. And I know recently, Valerie Bertinelli had a couple things to say on Twitter about Clapton too, about, basically that he was an a-hole, really. And so I was just wondering if Ed got a little defensive, maybe, that his idol was kind of, what do you think? What do you guys think about that?
Well, listen, Eric, I don't, and I don't agree with any of his anti-vaxxer shit or any of that stuff.
Right.
But, I interviewed Eric on a couple of occasions, and he was a totally lovely individual. He was great to me, complimented my coat, and also told me that he thought that I would get along well with Bob Dylan. So as far as
Eric goes, he's the man, Brad.
Nice.
But here's the thing about Eric is Eric is a real scholar of the blues. Like, he takes that shit very seriously. you know, and I sort of understand where Eric was coming from, because even Eric almost disowned his work with the cream because it wasn't as when he was younger, he thought that that's what the blues was how he played it. But as he got older, he changed his mind. He got very stringent about his definitions. And for him, I think the blues means, again, he almost approaches it from a scholarly perspective.
It's a headspace.
So when he listens to Ed or Brian May do their take on the blues, and he's measuring it against, Albert King or Robert Johnson or something like that, it's not fair in a way. But I can see where Eric would say, that's not. I mean, Eric was also critical of Led Zeppelin too. I mean, he didn't think very much of Jimmy Page's take on the blues either. So we're talking about a real purist here.
Yes.
And I don't think he was, I don't think it was personal. I don't think he had like jealousy of Ed or disliked Ed. But if you talk blues to Eric Clapton, he's going to approach it from that level, and he's just you're just not going to win on that level.
You think Ed was a little defensive because of the things he said? Maybe is that why you think he took shots at his hero? You know what I mean, a little bit.
Probably.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
I mean, Eric was a little cruel, so.
Right.
And Ed probably isn't really used to people taking shots at him either on that level. But
it's true.
I will say this: as much as I love Ed, I just did a book on him. Eric has a point.
It was fun though. It was fun though.
As sides to every story, aren't there?
As a blues player, Eddie Van Halen is a freaking great rock and roll.
Well, actually, if you think about it, it's. I found it kind of ironic that younger Eddie would criticize Eric Clapton from leaving the Cream format and kind of branching off and growing as an artist, but playing maybe softer rock kind of thing. And then as Eddie grew older, like most artists, he evolved as well.
Yeah.
And so it's almost a similar trajectory.
Well,
a 19-year-old looking at that is going to be like, "Oh, you don't rock anymore."
Yeah, I mean, Ed used to take shots when he was younger. Like he would take shots at Page too, but he completely changed his tune as he got older.
When he did it too.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. One thing I want to just mention, I think one of the unsung heroes in the story of Eddie is his second wife, Janie, because I know Wolfgang helped get him out of that, dark phase, but I mean, you'd have to think that she was a big part of it, because obviously his first wife couldn't, she tried, but I think, I don't know what the second wife did, but she seemed to help get through, her and the son maybe and his brother. But I'd have to believe that
Janie had a big mental. Janie was Ed's savior. Janie did the hard work.
Thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
Yeah, I
haven't heard anyone really say that lately, and it is a fact.
Yeah,
I think
she stood behind him and she helped him through the darkest of times.
And not only that, but she went through it with him.
Thank you.
Not just the substance abuse, but all the medical stuff.
Oh yeah.
That's
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She was an incredibly important person. I mean, to give Valerie her due, I mean, she probably had to put up a lot with a lot, and was probably exhausted by the time Ed got through that. Got cleaned up like the 5, 6, 7 times.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes that's what it takes.
But I think Valerie too, she had a career, and she, it was a whole different thing. Right. It was two very strong personalities, kind of clashing, and Ed needed somebody to give in to him totally, and Valerie couldn't do that, but Janie could. And
you guys tell the story really well in the book.
Yeah.
But she was also tough as nails. I mean,
Oh yeah.
She tied him to a couch for 6 months and didn't let him, go.
Yeah. And that Esquire article, he said basically he was catatonic. He just sat on the couch for like 6 months or a year, right? Just watched TV, right? That's all he did, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think she was very protective and just, I mean, I don't, I think she really deserves a lot of. I don't know. I'm just assuming, but she does.
She does. She does, definitely.
She did what nobody else could really do.
You guys never had that situation. I hope you have it with the loved one where where they were going through medical, and you had to go through them and keep them going and take them to these these terrible situations.
Right.
And she did a lot of that. And Chris and I both dealt with her quite a bit. And she also I felt did a great job functioning sort of as his spokesperson without sort of giving away too much personal stuff.
She's a publicist.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember because, I had a meal with her in New York City, and it was like we were talking about when Michael was going to come back at the very end there for this tour. And she was telling me about, you can't tell anybody. It's like, oh gosh, how can I keep my mouth shut?
What a burden to put on you.
I've been waiting for this, I've been waiting for this for years. And it's like, I can't tell anybody, but she had this idea and I can't remember. Unfortunately, I can't remember what it was now, but it was just like, it was going to be something you're going to put on the internet. Like this, just like, it was like a movie teaser type of thing. And it was just like, it was the beginning of Running with the Devil, with the horn, descending horn thing, the very speeded horn. Car horns, and then the bass coming in, and then it was something like he's back or something to that effect. It was something better than that though, because it was something
you just gave me goosebumps, man. I got chills.
It was something that tied in with the Van Halen lyric, and I just thought, this is genius,
Wow.
And it's like, and I'm like, I so want to be a part of this, and then we talked about, I was hopefully gonna, help them market it and everything like that. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I was born to do, and
wow,
it's so sad that didn't come together. I was just like, kind of like, oh gosh, it would have been so cool. The fans would have been thrilled. They were doing everything right. I mean, it was just like the stars were aligned, and unfortunately, a higher force said, maybe not this time.
Yeah.
So that plays into Ed being basically like everybody's human, a bundle of contradictions, because, at one point he's mad at Michael Anthony, at the other, but I think at the end it was pointing towards some kind of reconciliation. And I think Ed had grown, he's getting older, and he, didn't want to fight anymore, and just, hey, it's just a shame that they could never.
Sober too.
Yeah.
Sober.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So he could have some real perspective on what these people in his life. I mean, I thought one of the cooler bits in the book was Ed talking on the last tour in such positive terms about David, and it wasn't bullshit. It was like it was like sort of he had realized what Dave's contribution was, and just how sort of creative.
Yeah, he actually listened to the lyrics now, and he's like, "Wow, those are pretty clever. Those are pretty funny."
That's exactly what it was. It was exactly that. It was just like, hey, there's something a little bit deeper here than I kind of, and I think it's also, Roth grew older and he matured too, and it's just like, gosh, they could have probably, done that more progressive thing. Again, that's the other thing we lost is that album After a Different Kind of Truth.
Right.
That's right.
Well, when you said the reality is cocaine addiction induces paranoia. So when you get that out of your system and you don't think everybody's out to get you and take something from you again, all of a sudden, it puts you in a different headspace. So yeah, you guys did touch on all of that.
Yes, you did.
Neil, you didn't answer me. What's your favorite Van Halen song?
Yeah.
Okay. This to me is a no-brainer, but I feel like I got to kind of give a spoiler before I do it. My favorite Van Halen song, I judge based on the writing of the song, the composition itself. It's not one of my favorite recordings, but the song 5150, is actually my favorite Van Halen song.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, I wasn't really happy with the processed recording sound of that album. And the electric tom-toms and stuff like that. I wasn't a big fan of that. But from a strictly speaking, from a songwriting standpoint, with you've got all the elements that made Van Halen great. Everything I loved about them, from a guitar intro to the band kicking in, and then the riff for the verses is different than the chorus. And then you've got the middle, the guitar solo part, which actually is a mini song in of itself. And then this was at a point where Eddie didn't mind doing overdubs. So then you've got a rhythm guitar track behind the solo, which just kicks ass. And then you break it all down, go back to the riff that opened the song, and then come back with the chorus. And then the solo itself had every little element that I love about him, from tapping to volume swells to everything about it. I think that's probably it is my favorite Van Halen song. I just wish it was recorded at a different era in the band.
I haven't heard enough from Bent Tom. What's your jam?
Oh, easy. Last track, Women and Children First, in a simple rhyme.
There you go.
Nice.
It's just,
He'll say that 7 days a week and twice on Sunday.
I thought you meant that little 20-second thing, growth or whatever.
It feels like you've got a car with the top down, or a Jeep with the doors off, and you're just blowing down a warm coastal highway, and it's that's what I imagine in my head. That thing. So it's a heart thing for me, not like a guitar flasher. It's just the whole band feels like they're firing on all cylinders.
It's one of the earliest songs they wrote too.
Yeah.
So. And Tea Cake over there, even though you're hiding behind your sunglasses and shit.
Yeah, tell us your favorite, Tony.
Oh, dude, I'm Van Halen too. You know that.
Give us a song. Throw it out.
Dance the Night Away.
There you go.
Man. Hard Rock Beach Boys.
There you go.
That's
There
right.
you go.
Yeah.
You got it.
I can just see you now in my head, on the dance floor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you guys. He usually ends every show by twerking. Just so you know.
You gotta show me tattoo, Tony. Tony, you gotta show him a little skin. Show him a little Van Halen skin.
That's it.
Yeah.
Give him a little taste.
Let's see that ink, brother. Check this ink out, guys.
Wow.
Cool.
Got it live, man.
The stripes are coming out.
Nice.
Ouch. Yeah.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you guys. So let me show this while we have it. So October the 5th.
Yes. Sir.
Only a couple of weeks away.
Yep.
Yeah. You guys are super excited.
Let's make Ed Van Halen #1 again, guys.
Yes, let's
do it.
Absolutely.
Let's
do it.
Definitely.
The link is in the description. Let me ask you guys, so, when did you know in your heart that this book was going to happen? I mean, in your career and in your life, did you ever think that this day would come?
Oh, I definitely did. I mean, for me, it was, I wanted to do a book with Ed. That's, I think, one thing. I don't know if we mentioned that, or we got off track a little bit, but the other thing was on the guitars. When I was up there with Guitar Aficionado and we had the 50 guitars, I wanted to go through Ed's whole collection, talking about a museum display. My idea was just to do a guitar book initially, and just sit down with Ed and talk about each one of these guitars and do a nice, beautiful pictorial book and everything. But I also, in the back of my mind, was I want to write the Eddie Van Halen biography. That was kind of what I felt like was my goal. I mean, I remember working for Guitar Player magazine back in the early 90s, and Jazz Albrecht was talking about wanting to do a Keith Richards, biography. And I said, well, you can have Keith. I know you interviewed Ed in the early days and everything like that, but I want Ed,
Yeah.
And I never pushed Ed on it, but I tried to plant the idea there whenever I could, but I didn't want, you can't push Ed into anything. Ed will do what he wants to do. I was just hoping that maybe telepathically he could pick up that I want to do this. or whatever. But and Brad and I had talked before Ed passed about let's do this book on Ed, and we were hoping to get more interviews from him and hope to fill in a few holes here and there and everything. So it really was, I think for both of us was just really, it was part of the must do list,
There were a couple of big interviews that we'd even talk with Ed about, not sort of right around the time. I mean, we didn't know at that time, but right around the time he was diagnosed, when things got really bad, Chris was supposed to do a lengthy chat with him about Van Halen too. And, the last time Ed and I were communicating, this was around the time, wasn't that long before Les Paul died. And Ed wanted to do like a super in-depth interview with Les Paul, which would have been just so much fun and so cool. And what happened is, with Les died not long afterwards, and then Ed got sick. But getting back to the idea of doing the book, I mean, for me, I don't know if I had really been thinking about it, but about 6 months, I knew Ed was ill, and Chris and I started talking about this 6 or 7 months before Ed passed. But when Ed passed, what really struck me was I thought that there had been some, like what we call hit jobs, right, on Ed. I mean, Sammy's book was tough. Valerie Bertinelli's book was sort of tough on him. The Billboard piece was interesting, but it was, and it just seemed like all the buzz on the internet was always about Ed's terrible time in his life, or what a fuck up Ed was, or this. There was just a lot of bad stuff out there, and I thought, you know what? I want to be the guy to get the first, to sort of get the first word about Ed. I wanted to talk about him as a human being, and I also wanted to stress the idea that he is one of the great musicians of the 20th century. This gets lost, right? I mean, if you agree with me that Ed Van Halen is, the greatest or one of the greatest electric guitarists since Jimi Hendrix, you're basically saying he is one of the great musicians of the 20th century.
Sure.
So I wanted to make sure that the thing that struck me in my mind was I want to do a really great book that talks about Ed as a human being in an honest way, but also that there would be this musical component and this guitar component, because at the end of the day, what Ed really gave a shit about was the guitar.
There you go.
And I really I don't really think that there were many people qualified to do that. And so I thought to talk about Ed, in the full dimension. Like there might, who knows? There might be better writers. There might be this, might be that. But and so, I thought me and Chris, who have talked to him on a personal level, but also really talked a lot about music with him, that we were the guys capable of doing that. And I wanted to get this book out there before a lot of crap got out there.
Sure.
Well, you guys, being musicians, being guitar players, I think that was conducive to getting him to let down his guard.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody else could have done what you guys
spoke
did.
his language.
Definitely.
Spoke his language.
Well, we also didn't treat him like some freak or a god or anything.
No, we treat him like a human being.
That was my next thing. So you guys were able to challenge him, I guess, because he was comfortable with you. once the fanboy thing wore off, you guys have been doing this a long time. You knew him, well, personally. He knew you guys. So you guys must have had a comfort level where you could challenge him more than, say, some other people could who you didn't know him at all. You know what I mean? So I think that probably plays into, a lot of things. Did you feel comfortable doing that?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Ed was pretty, I would say he's sort of self-deprecating, right? So even if you push him a little bit and said, hey, this wasn't so cool or this or that, he would sort of hop in there and like, I don't know. I don't know if I see it in exactly those terms. That's why I think like some of the journalism can go to a weird place where you stop having a discussion with somebody. It's
right.
like modern politics, right?
Yeah, right.
You gotta nail the guy. Go
right.
out and nail the guy.
Well, people do that to sell books. So
Yeah. But I think that's the thing is like there's
talk about music wise.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really feel like I needed to nail the guy. Like when I did the Jimmy Page book. The Jimmy Page book was super informative, and Jimmy was great. He just gave me so much information. I didn't feel like I had to go and nail Jimmy Page to the wall about anything.
Right.
This is an opportunity to talk to one of the greatest musicians.
Yeah, exactly. I guess why screw it up?
And I'm telling you, it was a rare opportunity. This book hopefully is history. So to be all caught up in like, I'm going to nail Van Halen on this thing, to be caught up in that when you have the opportunity, that's like saying, okay, I'm going to nail this motherfucking Stravinsky dude to the wall.
It's
I'm going to fucking nail fucking Miles Davis. Like, isn't there like more to talk about than trying to catch somebody in their bad behavior? Like,
yeah, no, it's true.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little passionate about this, but
I'm there with you, man.
There's an art to doing an interview. And you don't really want to be confrontational. You mean that's fine for like 60 minutes or something like that, and then you just run the footage of the guy running past the cameras and slamming the door on you or whatever. I wanted to talk to Ed again, so I knew that there were some subjects matter that was off limits, and if he wanted to talk about it, he would. And I just knew from my past interactions. I mean, I've read a lot of things. Why didn't he ask this? And I said, well, if I asked Ed that would be my last interview with Ed, and
right.
Chris,
right. And that doesn't serve anybody.
If you bring up his, like, we do it in the book. I mean, if you guys want him to talk about like his relationship with Roth or Hagar, he's more than honest about that.
Yeah.
If you wanted to talk to him about substance abuse and, well,
that's the thing.
He was a little bullshitty about how sober he was. And I know that, but he would talk.
You had to talk with him as a contemporary with a sympathetic ear. I think that was the thing. And I think we have seen these things where people come at him and like kind of attacking him, or whatever. And I think that the thing is to like listen to him and to understand what he's saying and sympathize with him, and it's almost like being a psychologist or something. You don't want to deride somebody for the way they feel about something. Or whatever. So you just, I would let him open up. That was the thing. It was like,
actually, I think you guys did a really good job of that. I think it was very much, like a therapist whose job is, they don't ever answer a question. It's even though you think they're answering your questions, they're not. You're talking the whole time. I feel like this was you guys did a very good job of throwing something out there, letting him catch the frisbee, as you guys used to, like a dog chasing a frisbee. Great metaphor, by the way. I should actually put that. And then the Battle of Carthage, the Romans sieging Carthage, like great metaphors in the book. But very well written. But that kind of thing, that follows suit. Like you kind of allowed him to run with the ball, so to speak. And And Brad, to go back to what you said, I don't feel like you ever had to get him because, you know, he wasn't being intentionally misleading or lying to you guys. You know, I think that there was a truthfulness to the conversation. Yeah. Whereas if this was a 60 Minutes interview and the guy's lying to you and you have the facts in your corner, then you're going to approach it differently. I think it ever got
to me up to 5150 during like literally the worst period of his life.
Right.
And he wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted to talk.
So you let him talk.
He knew that there was concern.
Yeah.
You know, from his fan base, from his people, and so he would talk. You know, really frankly about his illness and his fight and his battle for his life. Yeah. You know, and you know, again, he because he's a human being, right? He was justifying certain things. You know, we've all heard the metal pick story, right? You know, and we all know that's a bunch of horse shit.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. You know, so, you know, but there are lies that you tell to yourself as well to get through to the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And
everybody does.
But at the same time, it's also not your job to call him out on it either. Let him tell his story.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys did a really good job of that.
Yeah.
I'm sure later on he would have, if you had brought that up, he probably would have said, maybe he would have said, you know what, that was a different time. A bad, you know, like we said, people change, and you know,
he hung on to that metal pick story for a long time.
and I only remember him using that metal pick for really Van Halen 3. That's the only time I ever really saw him using that. I don't ever remember him using a metal pick before that. I know he used one for 3, but that was the only time I ever physically
Wolf
saw
has disputed that story before. Wolf
shot that down. To stop smoking.
Yeah, right.
He didn't want to, and you know, Chris and I both hung out with him, and he was still, you know, vaping, and you know, when everybody knew that this was a fucking bad idea.
Yeah, right.
Well, even you mentioned the book, even when he was, you know, 46 years old, I think it was, and they were like, "You got to stop everything," and he didn't stop anything at that point.
You know,
like.
Yeah, yet in the book he says, like, what am I, an idiot? Of course I stopped. And we're like, did you?
The dichotomy between it was very interesting.
Right.
Yeah. So like I said, you know, there are lies that are created to hurt people, and then there are lies created to protect yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And listen, he's at the end of the day, he's a fucking brilliant musician, and we all want to know how he did what he fucking did. You know,
absolutely,
right.
And, you know, and to me, like again, sorry for the plug, but when I did my page book, I'm like, every journalist goes and starts talking to him about like the groupies and the this and the that, and they're not saying, okay, this is one of the greatest musicians of the 20th century. Isn't anybody interested in like
in the music,
in his production, in his guitar playing, in his this and his that, and you know what? You talk to a musician about that stuff, then the rest of it comes tumbling out.
Yeah.
If you show them respect for what they're doing. And
Brad, I'll actually even throw this out there. I think it's really clever, and I don't know if you did this intentionally before you started this interview with us, or if this just came up organically. But the fact that you asked each of us what our favorite Van Halen song is, I think that's really interesting because again, it goes back to speaking to us as human beings, but as fans and as musicians, like all that. That's it furthers, like, it kind of like puts us all on a level playing field kind of thing. I feel less like we're interviewing you and more like we're having a conversation.
Yes.
There you go.
Well, that's the key. Conversations. I mean, that's been for Brad.
It's a great title for a book.
That's been our careers. You know, that's been our careers. So that's what we do. Is we have
to pay me $1 million for that idea.
That's good.
You know.
Yeah.
But
all right, Brad.
My interview style is just really, you know, I do my research before.
Right.
I come up with questions in my head, and I come up with one question at the beginning, and then I just let the interview his place. You know, I don't have an agenda. I don't sit there with a list of questions that I have to ask. I let the person talking lead.
Yeah.
The interview.
Neither do I. I don't have it listed.
Brad, what's your favorite Van Halen song today?
Yeah.
There's one song that unlocked everything for me. And it really, like, part of doing this book, it was, you know, I would say this too. Like, it's, you know, even though Chris and I had been talking to Ed for so long, like, after doing this book, now I have so many more questions and it drives me crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
You sort of go on your own journey and your own discovery, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So what the thing was driving me nuts, and I don't know if all you guys play guitar, but so like, I couldn't, like, the analytical side of me was like, how do you, like, on a technical level, how do you describe sort of what Ed does? And it's not like blues.
Right.
It's not really jazz. It's not really, like, he doesn't play, like, you know, in these sort of cliches that were used to hearing with certain idioms of music. It was like his own sort of harmonic language in a weird way, you know. And that was my original purpose for interviewing Vi too. Was like, well, maybe Steve Vai could explain this to me.
Yeah, right.
He's probably smarter than me and a better guitar player.
Because he played piano first.
Right.
You cover it in the book really well, Brad. You guys cover it so well. You know, you talk in an excerpt in the book about him talking about the blues, and he says it's 12 notes, and I play them however I want. And that shows an expression of the freedom that he was looking for.
So I'm sorry, this story is going on too long, but it's an explanation of my favorite song, which is "Beautiful Girls."
There you go.
And the reason that is, it unlocked a certain thing with me. Is like, okay, what makes Ed? And then all of a sudden I had this sort of weird realization that what it was, I think what it is the interplay between, he's such a sensitive musician that he had to figure out a way to play guitar around what David Lee Roth does.
Interesting.
And David Lee Roth is not you know, singing great melodies or anything. David Lee Roth is a personality, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about this and thinking that, yes, David Lee Roth is Bugs Bunny and Eddie Van Halen is making sound effects and music to express the insanity of his lyrics. And it's like the guy that wrote the cartoon music for Warner Brothers cartoons is this guy named Carl Stalin.
Yeah.
And he just did all these crazy sound effects and, you know, and then I'm like, fuck, you know, you listen to Beautiful Girls, you listen to it as an isolated track, and there's Dave talking and Ed's going, you know, like he's describing the humor and the comedy of Dave's delivery. That has nothing to do with blues scales, guys, or jazz scales or whatever, you know. So to me, that you know, it was a little bit of the sensitive musician trying to come up with the right notes to describe David Lee Roth. Now that explains, you go to Sammy Hagar, who is much more of a traditional, conventional musician, who wrote conventional melodies. You know, we're saying, you know, a certain kind of way with chord, and Ed becomes more conventional in his play, which is why we sort of love the Dave era better than we love the Sammy era a bit, because
some of us do. Some of us.
It gets, because it's just wilder and weirder. And you can't. It's hard to pin down, like, you know, the scales or thinking about it in a theoretical kind of way. Who sounds like Ed?
Nobody.
Yeah.
You're
right.
Nobody.
I'm sorry. So Beautiful Girls to me is almost the perfect encapsulation of that dynamic.
Great song.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I can't wait to go listen to the song now after this, having this conversation. I don't know. I'm serious because I think because of what you said about it, I'm gonna listen to it differently now than I maybe did before.
Go up on there's also, you can get it without the vocals, and
the isolated tracks on YouTube.
Tracks, and you listen to it, and it's like he's playing on, like as Ed said, I'll play a Bavarian cheese whistle if I have to.
Right.
He's playing a Bavarian cheese whistle.
That's what he's doing. In a weird way, I always thought, and I came to this weird kind of comparison during reading the book that I don't think I noticed before. But I kind of felt like, and don't follow me on this journey as I explain this, because I don't want this to come across as the wrong way, but I feel like Eddie Van Halen was the alien ship at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And you guys were the ones that figured out the notes to play the keyboard to communicate so that it would understand you. It was like there was no other way to interact. Nothing. There was no way to communicate except, I play these notes. Now I'm speaking their language, and they can recite it. And all of a sudden, now we're on a different playing field. And I kind of felt like you guys kind of did that somehow. Like I said before, not to rehash the old thing. I don't think there's a lot of writers out there that could have done what you guys did because you spoke the language.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for that. That was that was the goal. That was the goal.
Yeah.
That's it.
It is definitely a must read. We all are huge readers here and have read them all. And
wait, Chris, you're not off the hook though. What's yours?
He said, "I thought Girl Gone Bad." I thought.
Girl Gone Bad.
Oh yeah, we did. We got that a while ago.
That was the one.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm with you.
That one I come back to all the time. So I mean, I love the whole catalog. Really, I love a lot of stuff. Even Ballad of the Bullet. Is. No one mentions Van Halen 3, but I think Brad, when we started on this book, Brad, go back and listen to Van Halen 3. Listen to the guitar. Just focus on the guitar playing. Just focus on that. Forget all the other stuff. And it was a weird period because I was there in the office with Brad when Van Halen 3 came out, and we were all kind of like scratching our heads, kind of going like, what's going on here? But after all these years and everything, and after hearing Ed kind of talk about how no one really got it, and really listening to it with a critical ear and maybe a more open mind. There is some just absolutely brilliant guitar playing in there. And Ed's playing so many different guitars on that record. Right. It's just, he's using all these sounds and textures and everything like that and really exploring the studio. As I think I said earlier, it's just Ed is kind of this frustrated progressive rocker. With girls and partying in cars and whatever kind of band, but he really would rather have been Alan Holdsworth, I think, in his own weird way.
Yeah.
You guys point out in the book, it's really true. I never really thought about it until I read it. That there after Van Halen 3 and like after that, he had all these like weird. Weird kind of syncopated things, and there was all these other parts. It was just like it was like I remember that song the first time I heard "Without You." I mean, it was just like it could have been like a poppier, but then there's all these other parts that are added in there, and then the rest of the album, like that syncopated stuff. It was just even the 3 new songs on the best of with Hagar, that "Learning to See." There's like that thing's
"Learning to See" is amazing.
Yeah,
and that was one really cool thing during that period. I got to go and see a rehearsal, just did like an hour with, Sammy, and that was one of the songs that they were really working on. And Ed, the challenge for Ed was to cover, there's like multiple guitars on that song. Right. And the challenge for Ed was to turn that into a cohesive piece of music that they could perform live.
I remember that.
And that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, that really hit me though when I read that. I'm like, that's it. Those parts, all those parts, those syncopated. It was just so much stuff. Going on there. It was just like
it's overload. It's hard for the mortal mind to comprehend, really, because it's just like Ed didn't want to repeat himself, and it's just like. It's so complex because there's all these syncopated parts, these overdubs and everything. And it's really complex music.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at the arc too, he kind of outgrew where he wasn't there musically anymore, even though maybe his fans were still there. I see it the same way as Hendrix, because when he went into Band of Gypsies, he lost a lot of traction from a lot of people. But fans like myself, that's my favorite album.
Yeah.
And if you see a lot of the interviews, like he did the last interview we did with Dick Cavett, he talks about if I want to play behind my back, I will. If I want to play with my teeth, but he's like, that's not my bag anymore, man. Like. And I know Buddy Miles did an interview as well, and he said, you know, he was looking to do small jazz gigs, trios. He wanted to do that jazz blues thing, you know. And Buddy Miles said, I think that's where he would have gone. He was just evolving, you know.
The tragedy, though, is that, and I think that this is, you know, a weakness on Ed's part, was that I wish he would have had, instead of just shutting down when people didn't accept it, that he just would have he would have pushed through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just, you know, health-wise and emotionally and all these other things that were going on, he didn't have the strength to take all of that on.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I feel like he took his ball and went home. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, you know, you can't.
There only could have been just like one producer that he would have trusted and listened to. So even though at that point he had total utter control, self-editing is tough. It's tough to do.
Wow.
When every idea you have you think is great, it's tough to self-edit.
No,
so
no band should ever produce themselves.
Yeah, and Gary was even saying, like, he told me, I think it's in the book, but he told me that, you know, even he was listening back and thinking, I don't know about that. You know, it'd be probably good to do it again.
Yeah.
But then the producer is like saying, that's fine. And then you have Ed on this other saying, that's what I want. And Gary's like, you know, like, who am I really, really to say no to all of this? You know?
Right.
Exactly. Even though every song is 8 minutes long.
That's the point of it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Got to that point. So the brown sound. So Alan Garber, who we had mentioned before, I think he correctly says there is no one brown sound.
No.
Eddie's, I think he's very correct in that it evolved or devolved, depending on who you talk to, you know, over the years. I mean, it was different. We all have our favorite tones. Like I said, my 1984, that's my favorite Eddie tone of that early era. And I love the four unlawful cardinal knowledge, that Saldano. I love that and the balance. I just love that sound too. It's like, you know, but the later tones, I wasn't as crazy about the different kind of truth tone. That wasn't my, you know, I don't know if, you know, Ed, I'm sure they had hearing loss. I'm sure Ed had hearing loss, and I'm sure I have a feeling like they voiced the amps in the later years because he was diminished high end, and I feel like he had the more highs in there, maybe because of the hearing loss. I don't know. Any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I think that does happen. Yeah, I think with you know, I've seen that with many guitar players with long-term exposure to loud sounds that you know, high prolonged exposure to that their sound does get more trebly. So there's definitely some credence to that. But yeah, it's again, Ed was just constantly tinkering and searching too. So that's, you know, it's just his taste changed from day to day. So there's also that. I think he was happy. I mean, you know, we just only scratched the surface of his guitar development, you know, and the amps and everything. The project, the Wolfgang project, 2 years, you know, 9 months going through pickups. That's a pretty serious commitment. You know, he just, you know, I review guitars constantly. You know, I can't even tell you how many guitars I've played in my lifetime, you know, because I review stuff for Guitar World to this day. And you see these artist instruments and you just can see the guy just kind of like, where do I sign? How much do I make on this? Great. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas Ed just like, no. You got to do this. You got to do this. No. Those screws are too cheap. They're going to strip and I'm going to be pissed off and I'm going to throw it at my sound guy, you know, or whatever. And it's like,
Excellent.
guy really cared. It's just like, and we saw that start with Ernie Ball and just progress through Peavey and then go through his own company. And that's a form of genius unto itself, I think. And again,
I also think that Van Halen sound like on the first record is brighter than most people.
Oh yeah.
If you listen to the isolated tracks on that, it's very, very bright, very bright.
Alan, I have
it's still one of my favorite. It's one of my absolute favorite recordings. The tone, everything about the first album. It sets the tone for everything that follows it, and it's extra special in my heart. No doubt.
We've talked about that because it's just like this acoustic guitar type of thing. The dynamics are there, and there's this zing in the treble.
Right.
And
JBL speakers.
The JBL speakers, I think, is the closest thing to probably what happened. I was off on for a while until I kind of saw that he actually had the double black bobbin Gibson humbucker in there in July. Because before that, I thought he maybe still had the Mighty Might in there. And there was something that Michael Anthony had said, getting off into total guitar nerd world here, but where Michael Anthony said that, Ed, someone would show Ed how to wire something, and Ed would say like, well, what if I do this, instead.
Right.
And that got me to thinking, because I just around this same time we were working on the book, just before it, I actually had done this Elliot Easton, this copy of this guitar that Elliot Easton had in 79, 80. It was a Fender lead, and it was a custom guitar, and it had a single coil pickup up in the neck, and it had this Seth Lover kind of super powerful ceramic magnet humbucker. And you could do all this crazy switching with it. You could do series and parallel. You could do the front coil. You could do the back coil. You can mix that in with the thing. And I was playing through a Friedman amp one day, and I just happened to switch it over from the typical humbucker series into parallel. And it's like, whoa, wait a second. This is like really close to that holy grail sound. It's like, there's that zing. And I thought, did Ed take the Mighty Might and maybe wire it in parallel by mistake, and just liked it? But of course, now seeing that it's probably is a Gibson in there, that's now not possible. So
the Mighty Might was a 4-conductor wire pickup.
Exactly. You could wire it.
1700. Was it like a super distortion clone?
It was pretty hot. Well, I think the one he used actually wasn't quite as hot, but I think it had a ceramic magnet and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I just remember it was kind of like voila. It's like when I tried this thing in parallel, I just did the Ed setting. I turned everything all the way up and cranked the amp all the way up and then played through this. And I'm going like, wow, there's that super zingy top end thing that I've been missing all these years. But I think it is the JBLs now, because I'm pretty much positive that he had that Gibson pickup in there, a mid 60s, not technically a PAF. It was actually a patent pending pickup. So it had the smaller Alnico magnet on it, but and that's the end of Guitar Nerd Talk for tonight.
I love it.
For all the people whose eyes are glazing,
it's not.
going, what the hell are they talking about? Are they
It
going
comes back around.
It
comes back around. There's no control over that here. Really not. Guys, I'm enjoying the hell out of this. You guys are, thank you so much. I just got to tell you guys, thank you so much.
Yeah. And for all of the people out there, I'll leave them with this, who think that this is just, all the Guitar World interviews just in book form.
No.
Not at all.
Even close.
Let me just tell you, Ed pooped 5 times a day. Because he had high metabolism. That wasn't in guitar. That was not in Guitar World, right?
And he had a Tascam 4-track recorder in the bathroom.
Exactly.
I will say
high metabolism.
You guys have probably noticed this, but it's like you may have read some of this material before, but not in this way, because we took all these years of interviews, our own interviews, some stuff from Steve Rosen, some stuff from Vic Garbarini. We pieced it together into this timeline of Ed's life, so if you really want insight into Ed from, almost from birth, but basically from moving to, to California, to Pasadena on through, that's what you're going to get. And you're not going to get that out of the reprints of our Guitar World interviews. Because,
I also think that the way we set up the interviews gives you new context to what Ed is saying. Too.
Yeah, sure.
And some of that was just,
that was the heavy lifting that we did. That was like really
that was new thinking on our part.
Well, Brad, you said that at the very beginning of this discussion. You said it was like a puzzle. You guys were able to piece together these things that you had and tell a cohesive story.
Yeah.
And it flows. Right. It flows.
And again, like I think that when you're in the middle, when you're in the heat of the battle, so to speak, there's a lot of stuff that you don't see. And we've been able to step back and sort of get a perspective and look at the big picture, look at the big story. Yeah. And unfortunately, we knew what the beginning and the end of it was.
Yeah.
So that also allowed us to sort of wrap our arms around it and have some new insight and see the whole, sort of the whole picture.
Yeah. Well, don't spoil the ending of the book for the people that haven't read it yet. We don't want you to know how it ends.
Yeah.
But you tell the big picture, but the detail is great too. I sat there and just like a lunatic there. I was going on Apple Music and I pulled up The Seeds, that one song that Ed was, you brought that up. I listened to that. I pulled up Yo-Yo Ma when you were talking about that. And then there was that, the part of Eruption that's in the
violin, it's on the
Kreutzer or something like that. Yeah, I pulled that up. I played that for these guys last week on here. I go listen. So I thoroughly enjoyed that, and anybody just pre-order this book, get this book, and just enjoy it, and just take your time reading through all this stuff. And if you really want to get a real composite of who this guy was, then this is definitely the book to read. It's a must read.
That's an understatement.
Well, I want to thank all of you guys. This has been a really fun interview for us. We really appreciate the thought that you put into the questions.
And you guys read the book.
Yeah. And then I just want to say, you guys, we were a whole lot more handsome back in the 80s. That's all.
For all the people still in the chat watching, this is just part one of our interview because we haven't gotten into the Halenville mailbag yet.
There you go.
I just have one question. So the one of my favorite parts, and I had to write it down because I would forget. So basically, it's a part. Basically, you guys had asked him during that period of time, like, how much guitar you played in the last 6 years? And, I'll paraphrase, but basically he had responded, he was playing a lot more cello and piano. And what got me, though, and I had never read this, and like I said, I read all of any interview that both of you have written on Van Halen, on Eddie, ever that came out, that he said, I only sleep 3 or 4 hours a day because there's so many things to deal with. I've learned to manage my time a little better. I have a friend that has, apparently it's a gene that certain people are like this, and he's a very artistic, talented person, professional musician, and he only needs that 4 hours. And it's like, why can't you sleep? And he goes, because the mind goes. And so in your personal experiences talking to Eddie, was he always like thinking like that? Was he always on?
I think that there was a manic element to his behavior. And I think that, in the days before, psychiatry and psychology has gotten a lot more sophisticated in the last 10, 20 years.
Sure.
And, a term of self-medication comes up a lot these days that wasn't the case when Ed was a young man. And it certainly had occurred to me on more than one occasion that the key to at least some of his substance abuse was a form of self-medication, especially the alcohol. I mean, it wouldn't help that he was doing a bunch of cocaine to exacerbate the highs, you know what I mean? Right. But I think that there was a certain, I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose, but I do think that there might have been a manic element to his personality, and that is why he gravitated towards alcohol to sort of calm it,
quiet the mind,
to quiet the mind, most of the kids just like smoke pot or something these days. Or
I noticed you guys both, and to me it crosses my brain, so don't take it the wrong way, but it was one of the two of you, Chris or Brad, one of the two you said in the book, basically that he would be out with Wolf or with Valerie like at the beach and he wouldn't be drinking at all. It was when he was working, because that got him in that zone where he was out. He had no inhibitions left. Yep. And it was really like performance enhancing in a positive sense, the way he saw it, not looking at, what damage it was physically, doing to him and the other stuff. But really it was for him to work, because it seems like I see a lot of true geniuses at all costs. I mean, William H. Burroughs talks about, I couldn't have written without being on heroin. He said, that was the cost I paid. He said, I paid very expensive doctors so I didn't overdose, but that was my muse, and it was a horrible muse to have. But in a weird way, he said that was the only thing that made me feel normal enough to be able to write. And it was weird that I saw that weird parallel there, that like it was the only thing.
I wouldn't disagree with that, and I think that might have been the case because he started drinking when he was very young, and I think that he probably he was in his mind was working on overdrive, like he completely, I mean, to come up with one thing on an electric guitar to change it.
Right.
But he changed every last aspect of this instrument. I mean, and just the instrument. So, your amplification, like playing, blah, blah, blah. This is a guy whose mind is definitely going in overdrive. And so, maybe that's what he needed to do in order to just go to sleep at night too.
The drive alone you guys talk about in the book, going into 5150, once he had that as like, oh my God, this is the world's my oyster. 18-20 hours and sleeping 4 hours and coming back and just rinse and repeat, like, wow, that's like he probably just, it seems like the impression I got from what you guys wrote, and it's written so well that I could feel that it was like he had to get this out. It was like, even if no one ever heard this music, that was recording this music, or at least getting this music somewhere on some sort of preservation device, whatever it be, with his catharsis.
I'm glad that you picked up on that, because like, some of the book, Chris and I, we would discuss it, like we would worry about whether we were being, too subtle. Like we didn't want to hit people over the head, with some of these observations. Yeah. We wanted to create a portrait. Sure. And you're just not sure, whether people are gonna pick up on all the nuances of something like that. But that was certainly part of our thinking. Is we definitely talk about his social anxiety, but you don't want to say it 10 times, right? Because then you're just treating your readers like idiots,
Right.
I like I said, some of the things that you guys have brought up, it just makes us happy, because we're never sure whether we're being too subtle about it, or whether people are going to sort of pick up on those themes.
Well, some of these came from his words himself, though, which is really nice too. Like, for example, there were multiple occasions where he references the songs were given to him, like almost from some external source. He just had to put it out there, and that kind of thing. But it was he talked about like almost these outer body experiences. I didn't write this; it was given to me, and I channeled it, and that type of thing. So that like what Tom kind of said, there was this. You guys did a really good job of capturing that element of the creation of song and the creation of artistry and the way his mind worked, which is a lot different than a lot of people may have anticipated going into reading the book.
Yeah.
While he's on the can a lot of times.
He's getting rid of toxins.
Getting rid of toxins. Taking in toxins and getting rid of toxins.
So you guys, your goal for this book obviously is to be hugely successful and to you know, as a fan, and all of us that are fans, we want people to know how important that this guy is or was, and how he should be. And you guys are like keepers of the flame in some ways in the future. I think that's part of your, your career, is to say, hey, listen, this guy needs to be remembered as one of the greats. Yeah. And we all, obviously, we hope that this book is hugely New York Times bestseller.
It will be
type there. That's we're all pulling for that, because
somebody do a hit on Dave Grohl, or maybe don't actually just ignore Dave Grohl. So his book's coming out the same day as ours. It
is.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, but he's an open book. There's no mystery about Dave Grohl.
But when they see that picture and that title, they're just, oh wait, no, I'm going to grab that one instead.
Yeah, I mean, but our hope here is that this book will be, will be a something that people can, remember him by, and just, I just don't feel like when he passed away that he got the, the coverage that he should have got. I was pissed off. I'm like, why isn't Eric Clapton putting a statement out or anything like that? Pete Townsend did. Good. I'm glad he did. I was like looking to see who. I was like angry. I was like, what are these people? That's just me. I'm a lunatic.
No,
my wife says I did the same thing.
As soon as I got the news that Ed passed, the first thing I did was I sent a text message to Janie, and I sent one to Matt Brock, and just said, from here on out, my goal is to keep this guy alive. I keep his memory alive with people. I will admit there was a little bit of backlash from Wolfgang about it being too soon. And I bless the kid, for looking out for his dad's best interests. But at the same time, people forget really quickly,
Guys, you gave a beautiful homage. The excerpt in there between Wolfgang and his father is priceless.
Oh yeah,
okay? That was priceless, and there's no disrespect from my point of view to that family, from anything you guys have done.
I don't even think we were disrespecting him or anything like that. I think Wolfgang. I understand he's a kid. I lost both my parents, and I mean, talk about that show at the Meadowlands when Ed threw the monitor at the sound guy. I was there. That was the night my dad died. I got the news that my dad died just a few hours before going to that show.
Wow.
So that was kind of a tough night for me anyways.
Whoa.
But it's, I understand, where Wolfgang's coming from, and he's protective of his dad and everything. Sure. But he needs to understand that we have his best interest at heart here. This is really about preserving the legacy of Ed. And plus we're up against a couple of other books that are coming out around the same time. Maybe they're good. Hopefully they are.
They better bring their A game. That's all.
I think it's important to be the first one out of the chute, and just with a fair and positive, just a balanced, nothing sensational, a balanced look at his life, a fair and balanced, type of look at his life.
And we felt we understand him. We are musicians too, and he's a brother of ours, and we wanted to present him, as we said, as this genius, this great composer of the 20th century, this great musician of the 20th century, and also this guy who invented some really great guitar equipment.
There you go.
And none of the other books are going to mention EVH. If they do, it's going to be 2 sentences. We've got a whole chapter devoted to EVH.
Right.
I've already seen some of the stuff, and it's sort of rehashing the whole Dave versus Sammy thing, and and Chris and I are like, well, yeah, it's part of the story, but really, that's not focusing on.
And we didn't even talk about that. And we didn't talk about that at all tonight, really.
No. And I would be surprised if that many books even focus on the Gary years. And you guys spent a significant portion of that period.
Yeah,
and I'm glad
a lot of good nuggets.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm definitely glad you did.
You read this book, you come out of it. It doesn't matter what you knew about Van Halen. Yeah. When you get done reading this book, you know a whole lot of stuff that you never even heard. I don't care how deep you're into it, how much stuff how big a nerd you are. This is your book.
Well, hopefully
put it this way. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, hopefully it becomes a textbook, for college courses.
I called it a Bible. Literally, I didn't know that's kind of a crazy analogy, but
I worked in an elementary. Well, it's a 6th grade, so it's middle school technically, but they always take donations. So I said, as soon I said, as long as I can get approval, because they're 12 years old, we'll see. If not, I'm going to donate to the high school, but I'm buying one to donate to my local high school.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
That's so cool.
If not high school, so.
Yeah, kids need
Yeah.
to know.
Cool.
Yeah. All I was going to say is at the risk of overstating the obvious, which I'm sure we're all thinking right now, when I go, you guys got to write my book. So,
Not a problem, Neil. We're going to focus on the good stuff. No problem.
The best compliment I can give.
No
So
problem.
here's the last thing I got for you guys tonight. So, Ed, one of the sad things is that, his dad died at 66 and, Ed passed away at 65 and he didn't want to be, die at 66 like his dad did, which we know was sad. But he wanted to be remembered as a nice guy. And I think that you guys would come out right away and say that he was a nice guy. Right?
And he was human. Yeah. He was a human being, guys.
He was flawed for sure.
Yes,
but we like Chris and I have talked to a lot of rock stars and stuff, and I can say that Ed's his biggest concern was, like, if you got to know him, is again to be like human, to have a personal interest in who you are, and to have a real conversation.
There you go.
He was he was a dynamite human being.
Yeah, we miss him a lot. We miss him like you wouldn't believe,
Yeah, man. So you guys could. So hopefully we've given you material for your next 10 shows. I mean,
we think so.
You could parse each chapter.
We think so.
I hope you guys don't think you're off the hook yet. You're coming back every week.
Yeah, we could do this.
We got a mailbag full of questions for you guys.
Yeah.
So listen,
guys. I've got 8 or 10 more questions I haven't even thought about touching on, because you guys are just such a roll here. But
when this book becomes as successful as we know it will become, we look forward to the next one, which Chris and Brad get on this. The guitar, a photo book of all the guitar, that would be incredible, or some kind of museum exhibition.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That
well,
would
if you're listening, we want to, we'll Wolf knows me, so hopefully he remembers me. I don't know. He should. I did his first interview ever, his first cover story. So, but
sure he does.
But I think that'd be great. I think people would love it. I mean, we've seen some cool stuff out there. We saw Rick Nielsen's thing, that he did. That was really cool too. But yeah, it would be great if we could get the Smithsonian or somebody. Or,
Super cool.
Yeah. Even in Los Angeles, there, if he doesn't want to, I can see that stuff's all valuable, and you don't want to. The insurance has got to be through the roof.
We'll all go to LA to see it. That's okay.
Yeah,
hey, you crash at my place.
No good.
Exactly.
Good.
But thank you guys so much. This was a great night, and we'll be pushing this book to everybody we know, and congratulations! Just really a great book.
You guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here, Chris and Brad. There it is. October the 5th. Your pre-order link is in the description.
And let's make this book what it should be, like let's give Ed another number 1 there, you know?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Let's go.
Really good. I mean, like I said, when I saw Grohl's book was coming out the same day as ours, I was like, bastard, Yeah, he thinks he's a nice guy, but he's stomping on Ed's parade.
That is awesome.
So we'll come back, like when the paperback comes out. We'll come back.
There you go. With the extra chapter, you're going to add in the paperback, right?
Yeah.
When we get the books on tape.
We'll answer all the questions from
in the mailbag. That's it. All right, we're holding you to your
we haven't
word
even started yet. We haven't even started yet. So that'll be nice. But gentlemen, thank you guys so much.
Guys.
We love you guys, man.
We're beyond grateful.
Absolutely love you.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Guys, have a good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Take care, chat.
Yep.
We will be changing our time and our day of our show to Wednesday. at 9 p.m. and this starts this Wednesday.
Yep, this Wednesday.
Right there. Yeah. So this is the last Sunday night show. We'll be right back here on Wednesday. You guys hang out a minute.
Absolutely.
We're going to watch this new intro, outro one more time. Brad and Chris.
Thank you guys so much.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been.
We look forward to you being back Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday.
Okay with that.
All right, everybody.
Good stuff.
Have a great night. Have a great week. We'll see you Wednesday at 9 p.m. right here.
Yep.
Take care.
That's not the Van Halen logo if you look closely.
Yeah. Let's do the 5150 walk.
Oh, wow. I see it now. Yeah.
Oh, you're showing that off, John? Really?
Uh-oh.
Oh, that's great.
Look at that.
There we go.
That's awesome.
I don't even know which one to play yet. Oh boy.
Oh, man.
Nice.
Nice.
Nice. Real nice.
All right, kids.
Too much fun. Awesome.
We're out of here.
Awesome.
Rock on.
See ya.
Guys. Be good.